LoveLore Library. Chapter 174. Zheng Pei's worries were not completely unreasonable. Although Emperor Zhou and Pang Xiao called each other brothers, Emperor Zhou was also very afraid of the large number of troops in his hands. When Pang Xiao was fighting outside, Emperor Zhou had taken Pang Xiao's mother, grandfather, and grandmother into the palace several times to take care of them. On the surface, it was said to be dignified and to be filial to Pang Xiao on behalf of his brother, but in reality, it was a kind of threat to Pang Xiao. If Pang Xiao dared to rebel or was unwilling to obey, then it was very likely that the old man would die of illness in the palace. Because of this, Pang Xiao had been very angry, but he had also been very patient. Now that he was so angry, it must be that the emperor had done something like this again. Pang Xiao's face was cold and he did not speak. Huzi looked at Pang Xiao's expression and picked up the note to take a look. He shouted in surprise, "Shameless old dog Yuchi. He wants to dig out fourth young Mrs. Hart and smash it together with the bones and meat for the bitch of the Chow family to eat, saying that it is to preserve her youth. This is simply worse than pigs and dogs." Zheng Pei took the note from Huzi's hand and carefully read it. He frowned. "Wang Yi, you should be concerned about the rear affairs now. It's fine that you left a guard for fourth young Miss Qin, but why do you often pay attention to Dian? If someone has something on you, aren't you afraid that someone will accuse you of treason and collusion with the enemy? What's more, who is young Miss Qin? Her father is Qin Mang. She is the daughter of your father's murderer. How can you do this? How can you face your father by doing this?" Zheng Pei was Pang Zhongjing's aide. At that time, Pang Zhongjing felt that he was going to ruin things, so he made some arrangements in advance. He had escaped death and was bent on revenge. First, he drugged Qin Huaiyuan several times to end his life. Then, he swapped Qin Huaiyuan's only daughter, all for the sake of seeing Qin Huaiyuan suffer when he found out the truth one day. As for finding Pang Xiao, it was completely based on a small matter in his memory. At that time, when Madame Meng drove away the Yao clan, he happened to bump into her. After Pang Zhongjing's family died, he found the whereabouts of the Yao clan just to try his luck. He didn't expect that the Yao clan would really be lucky once and become pregnant. Later, when Li Qitian revolted, it was Li Qitian, Zheng Pei found the Yao family and brought the 14-year-old Pang Xiao was brought into the army to be trained. Also, Pang Xiao was not even a concubine's child's son's. He was not even a consort's son's son was not even a concubine's was son. Zheng was and he was of him was considered a concubine's. He was as sons. He. Therefore, no matter how powerful Pang Xiao was now, no matter how frightening his name was, Zheng Pei still looked down on him. If he found out that Pang Xiao did something wrong, he would still teach him a lesson. In the past, Pang Xiao was very respectful to Zheng Pei. Today, he didn't answer. He just sat quietly at the head of the table. His sharp eyebrows revealed a faint coldness. His cold eyes, tempered on the battlefield, fell on Zheng Pei, making Zheng Pei's heart tremble. "Little Wang Yi." Zheng Pei's voice was a little dry. Pang Xiao chuckled and said, "Mr. Zheng, I think there is something you must not understand." Zheng Pei cupped his hands and said, "Little Wang Yi, please advise me." Pang Xiao stood up and walked step by step towards Zheng Pei with his hands behind his back. His aura was like a towering mountain, oppressing Zheng Pei so much that he couldn't help but take 2 steps back and lower his head. "Mr. Zheng, don't forget that this king is the master and you are the servant." Zheng Pei heard this and suddenly widened his eyes. He raised his head and looked at Pang Xiao in disbelief. His face flushed red and he was so angry that his beard trembled. "Wang Yi, what do you mean?" Obviously, Mr. Zheng has forgotten his identity. Or do you think that this king is still the young boy who can be manipulated by others? Manipulated by others. He actually thought that. Zhang Pei's face became more and more purple. Little Wang Yi, what do you mean? This old man can't afford to be manipulated. Don't forget that if this old man didn't mention it to His Majesty, you would be. If Mr. Zheng didn't mention it to His Majesty, I would still be called Yao Xiaoyao. I would still be filial to my mother, grandfather, and grandmother in a small town. I could still run a small restaurant. When I was happy, I would cook a few dishes. When I was depressed, I would call a few friends to drink and have fun. Even if I couldn't be an official or become rich, I would still be happy and live a carefree life. I wouldn't be thrown into a battlefield full of broken limbs and blood at such a young age. I wouldn't have to survive in the cracks under suspicion and pressure. And I wouldn't be scolded by a servant like a grandson. Pang Zhao's words made Hu Zi's eyes fill with tears and Zhang Pei's face turn pale. You follow this king, but you don't know your identity. Do you still think that this king is the young boy who hasn't seen the world? Since you've already pulled this king into this circle, and this king has climbed to this height with his own efforts, then everything is no longer under your control. Don't talk about revenge for killing his father. This king has never seen his father, nor does he have a jealous and vicious official mother. This king has no feelings for the Pang family. This king's surname was Yao from the beginning. It was you who forced this king to change his name in order to use Pang Zhongjing's banner. Is this king not right? You've used this king enough. You didn't expect this king to break free from your control, did you? You can also write this in the secret report to your majesty, telling this king's words today to your majesty. Zhang Pei's eyes suddenly widened. His lips trembled and his body trembled. He knew. He didn't expect him to know. Hu Zi looked at Zhang Pei in disbelief and murmured, Mr. Zheng, you. How could you? In his mind, the person who had always been loyal and devoted to Wang Yi was actually a spy arranged by the emperor to stay by little Wang Ye's side. Pang Xiao snorted coldly and sat back in his seat. He said sternly, Mr. Zheng, this king spared your life because of father. After all, you've been loyal to father all your life. But this king warns you, don't have any ideas about Qin Si. And you're not allowed to be disrespectful in front of this king. If you stretch your hands too far, you'll be chopped off. Zhang Pei had received a lot of attention for many years. His status in the army was also extraordinary. He didn't expect Pang Xiao to be so merciless in admonishing him. He lost face and said angrily, Little Wang Yi suspects that I'm not loyal, and I have nothing to say. But little Wang Yi shouldn't have, and the daughter of his enemy, back then, father's achievements shocked the emperor, and he was already feared by the fatuous emperor. Otherwise, how could a small plot to sow discord take father's life? You clearly know that the fatuous emperor was just a bait. The real enemy has never been Qin Meng, but the fatuous emperor. Your actions of venting your anger on Qin Meng's family are simply incompetent and ignorant of gratitude and grudges. This king has already avenged father's death. This king destroyed northern Ji and killed the fatuous emperor. This king caught the treacherous officials who instigated the fatuous emperor and cut them into pieces. The old officials of northern Ji still hate this king and call this king a devil behind his back. If this king's actions don't count as revenge, then what does? Could it be counted as Mr. Zheng venting your anger on an infant girl without distinguishing between gratitude and grudges? If this king is disloyal and unfilial, then Mr. Zheng's actions of wavering between this king and your majesty are considered loyal and filial? One question after another made Zhang Pei's face turn ghastly pale. For a moment, he was speechless. Originally, Zhang Pei was full of reason, but when Pang Xiao said that he had been secretly communicating with His Majesty through letters, he lost his confidence. At this moment, he couldn't tell why his blood was surging. He only hated that he couldn't stay away from Pang Zhao's side. He didn't want to see those eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. Zheng Pei pursed his lips, cupped his hands, and turned to leave. This time, Huzi didn't immediately chase after him. Instead, he looked at Pang Zhao worriedly. Master, if Mr. Zheng tells your majesty about what happened today, then your majesty will be even more afraid of you. Your majesty has never been less afraid of this king. This king is humble, but he is also afraid of this king's military power. Even if this king gives up his military power, he is still afraid of this king's prestige in the military. Even if this king doesn't have the prestige in the military, he will still be afraid of Tianming. Pang Zhao snorted coldly. His bony fingers tapped on the armrest of the round chair. This king has long known Mr. Zhang's thoughts. By exposing him today, I will prevent him from thinking too highly of himself and doing something that this king has no choice but to kill him. In the end, his loyalty to his father is also real. Huzi nodded. Thinking about Pang Zhao's words and carefully thinking about Pang Zhao's experiences over the years, he felt a wave of sadness in his heart. Wang Yi had come to this point and endured this huge pressure because he had no choice. Seeing that Pang Zhao's face was still cold, Huzi rolled his eyes and changed the topic to Qin Yining. That old dog Yuqi is so vicious. I wonder how Fourth Miss is doing now. Wang Yi, do you want to think of a way to help Fourth Miss? Sure enough, at the mention of Qin Yining, Pang Zhao's cold expression was somewhat restrained, and the corners of his lips curved up into a warm smile. You don't have to worry. Didn't Ji Yun say that they are heading to Fairy Lady Temple? Sister Eve must have thought of a countermeasure. Just wait and see. There will be follow-up news before tomorrow. Huzi raised his eyebrows and said, Wang Yi really has confidence in 4th Mississippi, of course. How can someone that this king has his eyes on not be able to handle such a small matter? Huzi heard this and secretly criticized in his heart, but on the surface, he agreed with him. Sure enough, the next day, news from Dian came. Pang Zhao looked at the contents of the note and couldn't help but laugh. The more he laughed, the more hearty he became. In the end, he threw the note to Huzi and laughed to himself. Huzi took the note and curiously read it carefully. He couldn't help but admire him and said, 4th Miss can think of this method. In this way, won't that shut up that old dog Yuqi's mouth? But you said that 4th Miss went to Fairy Lady Temple. Could it be that she knows that Fairy Lady Lu is a Tianjizi? Otherwise, why would she dare to use the name of Tianjizi to spread rumors? No. She shouldn't know. Pang Zhao thought carefully and laughed again. She must have taken money to ask Fairy Lady Lu to pretend to be a Tianjizi. That bald guy, wouldn't his hands be tired of collecting money? Thinking of this, Pang Zhao suddenly changed his expression and said, tell people to immediately secretly keep an eye on Fairy Lady Temple. Pay close attention to Tianjizi's movements. Huzi heard this and was startled. Why? Wang Yi is afraid that Tianjizi will run away. Pang Zhao just smiled and said, send another post to Mu too. Tell him that this king will visit the day after tomorrow. Huzi was even more surprised. Wang Yi, you plan to let Mr. Mu fulfill the bet. The son pays the father's debt. Tianjizi is his master. If his master runs away, isn't it normal to find him to pay the debt? Don't you think so? What don't you think? Chapter 175. Amidst the mountains and lofty ridges at the border of Great Zhou and Great Yan, there was a mysterious valley named Heaven's Secret Valley. Everyone in Jianghu knew that Heaven's Secret Master was a capable man from Heaven's Secret Valley. However, many people had only heard of the name of Heaven's Secret Valley, and no one had ever been able to visit it personally. Some people said that Divine Design Valley did not exist in the secular world at all. Some people also said that Divine Design Valley was surrounded by miasma, and no one who approached it could survive. Naturally, no one could enter the valley. Some people even analyzed that there must be a Chimenduinjia around Divine Design Valley, and ordinary people could not break it, so they could not find the gate of Divine Design Valley and see the immortal palace of Divine Design Valley. At this time, Peng Shao was sitting upright on a small stool in front of a straw hut in the deep mountains between Zhou and Yan. His face was dark as he stared at the young man in front of him, who looked like a crowned jade, but was wearing a patched robe. He took a wooden cup from the young man's hand, took a sip, and spat out 2 or 3 tea stalks. Look at you, you are also Tian Jizi's disciple. Your master is a rake for money, but you are a stingy ghost who will be distressed even if you light a lamp for a while. How can your sect produce such a person? What kind of lousy tea is this? Is it also for people to eat? Peng Shao put down the wooden cup in disgust and pointed to the barren firewood shed and sparse fences around him, as well as the green vegetable field that had just been fertilized with manure. This is all the property of your Divine Design sect. If those people outside know that Divine Design Valley is so poor, and you, the nominal head, wear patched robes, they will laugh their heads off. Mu Jinghu looked at Peng Shao expressionlessly, poured the bowl of coarse old tea that Peng Shao disliked into his own wooden cup, took a sip slowly, and then said in a slow voice without any tone, "My master refuses to admit that I am her disciple, and only allows me to call her martial uncle." This was the first time that Peng Shao heard Mu Jinghu mention this. He asked curiously, "Oh, why does your master refuse to admit it? Is it because you are too wooden? Or is it because you are too stingy?" Mu Jinghu took another sip of tea, carefully smashed the tea fragrance in his mouth, and then said, "When Grandmaster accepted my master as her disciple, she taught me martial arts, but she was too lazy to learn. When I taught her medical skills, she was too lazy to learn. Later, she was too lazy to learn. She was only willing to learn some methods of Taoism. She was only willing to learn some methods, and said that she was just to make a living. To learn martial arts. She was too lazy to learn martial arts. She was too lazy to learn martial arts, and she was too lazy to learn martial arts. She was to learn martial arts and taught. At first, I wanted to call Grandmaster Master, but Grandmaster pushed me to Master and said, I'm not teaching you for myself. I'm teaching you to protect her. She's your master. You're learning martial arts and medical skills so that you can protect her in the future. Therefore, I also called Master Master. But Master found me troublesome and refused to acknowledge me. She told me to call her martial uncle. If Grandmaster accepted another disciple in the future, I would be her junior apprentice brother's disciple." Huzi was stunned. He did not even realize that he had chewed and swallowed the tea leaves. When Peng Shao heard this, he burst into laughter. This sounds like something Tian Jizi would say. Apart from being a little wooden, a little dull, a little honest, a little silly, and a little stingy, you don't have any other shortcomings. Why doesn't your master want you? Why does she insist on making you her martial nephew? Mu Jinghu raised his head. After a while, he asked, You have already pointed out so many of my shortcomings. No wonder Master did not accept me as her disciple. Ha! Peng Shao was amused by this blockhead and laughed loudly again. Huzi also laughed. Then, Mr. Mu, did your Grandmaster accept another disciple? Mu Jinghu shook his head honestly, I don't know. Grandmaster is elusive. I haven't seen him for many years. Peng Shao laughed and sighed, Blockhead, I am here this time to make you fulfill the bet. Stupid fox, I know. Otherwise, the two of you would not have been able to find me. Mu Jinghu put down his wooden cup and said seriously, I helped you this time. After that, we are even. Good. It's a deal. You are a fox. Too cunning. I don't believe you. Mu Jinghu took out half a piece of paper from his sleeve. There was a written agreement written on it with charcoal and handed it to Pang Shao. Put your fingerprint on it. Pang Shao looked at the shabby piece of paper and said speechlessly, even if you want to write an agreement, can't you find a better piece of paper? As he spoke, he smeared some charcoal and put a fingerprint on it. Mu Jinghu seemed to be relieved. He put the agreement into his pocket and said, tell me, what is it? Blockhead. I want to ask you to protect someone for me. Someone who is very important to me. I will protect her until I bring her to my side. Mu Jinghu nodded. He did not ask who the other party had offended and why he needed to protect her. He also did not ask when Pang Shao would bring her to his side. He did not think about what trouble this matter would cause him. He only nodded and said, what is her name? Where does she live? Her surname is Qin, her maiden name is Yi Ning. She is 15 years old and lives in the Marquis of Anping's residence in the Dian capital. She is the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Anping, Qin Meng. Fourth in the family. A woman. Mu Jinghu was finally a little surprised. Pang Shao smiled and nodded, yes, she will be my wife in the future. Oh. Mu Jinghu nodded, it must be another fox. Pang Shao heard and laughed again. The people in the Dian capital did not know how Pang Shao deployed his troops in Liang City. At this time in the palace, the Empress was listening to her personal attendant's reply. She was so angry that her face had turned red. She was so angry that she smashed everything in sight. In the blink of an eye, Fengyi Palace looked like it had been ransacked. The floor was covered with broken porcelain, coral ornaments were overturned, incense burners fell to the ground, jewelry boxes were overturned, and the huge string of Eastern beads was torn apart, the beads rolling all over the floor. The palace servants were all trembling in fear. They shrank their necks and knelt in the corner, afraid that they would be affected by the Empress' anger. Even so, the Empress could not ease the anger in her heart. She kicked the young eunuch kneeling at her feet, causing the young eunuch to roll on the ground. The Empress gritted her teeth and cursed, damned Tian Jizi. How dare she play tricks on me? The eunuch who replied advised in a low voice, Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Tian Jizi might have other things to do and left temporarily. She might be back in a few days. You also know that this kind of person is usually elusive. Moreover, Tian Jizi still has to serve the Emperor's elixir. She won't dare to leave the capital for too long. The Empress said angrily, If she dares to come back, I will skin her alive. The attendant smiled and said, Your Majesty has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Even if you want to skin her alive, you still have to consider the Emperor's safety, right? You should calm down first. The Guizhong said to ask Nyang Nyang to calm down and calm down. Whoever dares to make Nyang Nyang unhappy, the Guizhong will remember it in his heart. You are His Majesty's most beloved person, the pearl of the Guizhong's palm. Who dares to provoke you? Isn't that the same as provoking the two most powerful men in the world? None of them have a good ending. There is no need for Your Majesty to ruin your health because of these people. The attendant had served the Empress for many years and knew that the Empress was most proud of two things in her life. The first was that she was born in the Chao family, and the second was that she married the Emperor and became the Empress. These comforting words contained the two things that poked at the Empress' heart the most. The Empress immediately felt her mood improve. You old fellow, you only know how to sweet talk. The Empress sighed and said, Forget it. Send someone to tidy up everything. Later, if His Majesty is willing to come, this Empress will first dress up to receive him. Chapter 176. Today, the Empress did not wear her usual heavy makeup or jewelry. Instead, she only lightly brushed her eyebrows and used a bit of lip gloss on her lips. Her entire person looked pale and haggard, making people feel pity for her. The Emperor was used to seeing the Empress's radiant and beautiful appearance. When he saw her dressed so simply and elegantly, his large hand stroked her smooth long hair. His heart almost ached. "Jin's darling, Jin's little sweetheart, look at you. It's only been a day and you've already become so haggard. Are you blaming Jin for being incompetent, for not being able to get you some Qin clan meat to preserve your youthful appearance?" The Empress leaned on the Emperor's knees, her long hair scattered all over his knees. She looked up at the Emperor and weakly said, "How could Qinxia blame His Majesty? Qinxia only sighs that my luck is not good. In the end, I can't beat the person who Tianjizi divined a good fate. However, Qinxia doesn't understand. It was clearly Tianjizi who divined Qinxia's Qin clan meat first, that Qinxia could preserve her youthful appearance. Why did he divine that the Qin clan's fate was extremely good in the blink of an eye and could protect the stability of the country in the Dian? Qinxia only feels that Tianjizi's words contradict each other and are very contradictory. That's right. Jin also feels the same. Perhaps they are outsiders and don't think too much when doing things. It's true that using Qin clan meat can preserve one's youthful appearance. It's also true that the fate of the Qin clan can protect the stability of the country. Because the Emperor had taken Tianjizi's elixir, his body gradually became better and his dragon horse became more energetic. He even became more courageous in bed. He had personally experienced the power of Tianjizi's elixir. In addition, Tianjizi had long been famous outside. The Emperor had never doubted Tianjizi's abilities. Therefore, when Tianjizi said that Qin Yining was born in Jixiang, and that her existence could ensure the stability of the country, the Emperor believed without a doubt. Furthermore, he was just about to order his men to spread the news that Qin Yining is a demon fox who has descended to the mortal world and is here to disturb the peace of Great Yen. She must be dealt with so that we can ensure the long-term stability of Great Yen. But before he could do anything, Tianjizi had already announced Qin Yining's real destiny. This was enough to show that Tianjizi was a divine strategist who could see everything clearly. If it wasn't for Tianjizi's accurate calculations, how could it be so coincidental that Tianjizi managed to open his mouth before he issued the decree? From the Emperor's point of view, Tianjizi was wholeheartedly loyal. She used this method to ensure the survival of the Qin clan, thereby stabilizing the country of Dian. He was the emperor of a country. Even if he didn't believe that the existence of a little girl like Qin Yining could ensure the survival of the Yan dynasty for thousands of years, the emperor was very willing to believe that this Ji Xiang was true after being beaten by Du Zhou for so long. The empress had accompanied the emperor for many years. How could she not understand the emperor's thoughts? She could guess what the emperor was thinking when he raised his eyebrows. The emperor didn't know that Tianjizi didn't calculate that Qin Yining's flesh could retain her youthful looks. She had made up this story after threatening Tianjizi. Naturally, she didn't know the truth behind this matter. However, she couldn't explain to the emperor that Tianjizi promised me first and then played me. Therefore, this time, the empress could only suffer in silence. If His Majesty says so, then it's naturally like this. The empress suppressed her unwillingness and suppressed her anger. Tears of grievance flowed down her face. This concubine just feels that this concubine's life isn't good. Just a few days ago, His Majesty warned Wang Yuxian. My father only had a few capable disciples, and one of them was destroyed. This concubine's family doesn't have many male descendants, so I was counting on a few disciples to hold up the family's reputation. Wang Yuxian was warned by His Majesty, and this concubine was laughed at in the harem. I wanted to retain my youthful looks, but I couldn't touch the Qin clan. This concubine's heart is very sad. When the emperor heard the empress' sweet voice, his heart melted into water. My darling, what do you think will make you happy? As long as it's within His Majesty's power, His Majesty will agree to it. However, if you want the Qin clan to retain their youthful looks, Good Night won't be able to do it. His Majesty still needs her to ensure the peace of Ardayan. How about you try someone else? The Empress rolled her eyes and said in a sweet voice, this concubine was thinking the same thing. The Tianjizi said that he wanted a beauty with the Yin attribute. Don't we have many such beauties in the harem? This concubine thinks that Consort Shu is extremely beautiful, and she's also born in June. I think she's about the same as the Qin clan, right? The emperor had long forgotten who Consort Shu was. He didn't even remember what she looked like. When he heard the empress' words, he immediately nodded. Let you, little thing, do what you want. Shen doesn't care. Not to mention Consort Shu, even if you used all the beauties in the harem to retain your youthful looks, Shen would still be willing. Is His Majesty's words true? The empress immediately became spirited. She sat up straight and wrapped her arms around the emperor's neck. Of course it's true. The emperor generously kissed the empress' lips. The empress immediately smiled and laughed happily with the emperor. Percent, what did you say? The empress chopped up Consort Shu and steamed her food. She even threw Consort Xiang into a big pot to fry. Qin Yining was so shocked that he dropped the teacup in his hands. Erbai was so shocked that he jumped and buried his head in Qin Yining's lap. Qin Yining absent-mindedly stroked Erbai's furry little head. He muttered in a daze, this evildoer, this beast. Bing Tang nodded with a pale face. After this servant heard it, I also felt that it was too sensational. It was said that the empress cooked Consort Shu and Consort Xiang and invited the emperor to taste them together. This servant, Og. Before she finished speaking, she was so disgusted that she retched. Qin Yining also felt his throat churn. He tried his best to suppress the urge to vomit. She had escaped a disaster, but she didn't expect the empress to target the concubines in the harem. The emperor was so muddle-headed that he allowed the empress to do whatever she wanted. Consort Shu's father is the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Lord Yuan. Consort Xiang's father is the imperial censorate's right imperial censorate, Lord Wang. They lost their beloved daughters, how could they let this go? The Ministry of Justice and the imperial censorate. The emperor is really a muddle-headed ruler. In order to dote on an empress, he didn't care about anything else. Qin Yining gritted his teeth. For a moment, he lamented the loss of the two young lives. For a moment, he was filled with resentment towards the empress' viciousness. His expression became extremely ugly. Song Lan and Qiu Lu stood at the side, their faces pale with fright. Even Ji Yun, who had seen the world, felt a chill in her heart when she heard this. If it wasn't for Miss's timely reaction, I'm afraid Miss wouldn't be here now. Song Lan wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Qin Yining nodded and placed the snow-white Erbai on the square table. He looked at Erbai's pair of large clear eyes and thought for a moment. His gaze gradually became firm. I'm not afraid. Aren't I fine now? The Empress' viciousness has made me see reality. She didn't harm me this time and killed others to vent her anger. I'm sure she won't let me go in the future. She can't touch me, but who can guarantee that she won't harm our family? Qin Yining stood up, his white hand tightly gripping the corner of his clothes. I have to make the first move to gain the upper hand. She had to kill the demon empress first. Otherwise, the family Qin would never have peace. Chapter 177. Qin Yining's words were treacherous, but the people in front of her were her confidants. Song Lan and Qiu Lu were loyal to her. Bing Tang and the Empress had a grudge against each other. Ji Yun was loyal to Pang Xiao and hated the Dian Empress. That was why she could speak her mind without hiding anything. You're right. Bing Tang nodded seriously. The Empress's viciousness and absurdity are beyond anyone's imagination. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't stand her bewitching the Emperor and bringing disaster to the country and its people, my father wouldn't have colluded with Qin Lu. Unfortunately, the Demon Empress was only half dead at that time. Later on, her health improved, but our family's lives were sacrificed. Everyone knew about Bing Tang's experience. Qiu Lu and Song Lan patted her on the shoulder and lowered their heads sadly. Bing Tang sniffed and forced a smile. I'm saying this for no other reason than to remind you to be careful. If you don't have the confidence to kill her in one blow, don't act rashly. The Demon Empress is unreasonable. If you can't kill her in one blow and give her a chance to fight back, the result is not something you can bear. If things really develop to that extent, it's better for you to be patient and plan in secret. Otherwise, it's not worth it to sacrifice your entire family. Qin Yining nodded and held Bing Tang's hand. I understand what you're saying. Don't worry, I won't hurt the jade bottle for the sake of killing rats, but I won't let her go either. Bing Tang nodded heavily. If you need anything, just let me know. I can't do anything else, but I know how to make poison. Qin Yining smiled and deliberately teased her. My family's Bing Tang has such great skills. We'll have to rely on you in the future. Don't cry until your brain is damaged. If you don't know how to make poison, how can I kill the Demon Empress? How can you cry until your brain is damaged? Bing Tang glared at Qin Yining and smiled through her tears. Qin Yining saw that she finally smiled and changed the topic. Third cousin's wedding is next month. I want to give her a set of rouge and face powder from Jiao Rong workshop. Third cousin usually stands aloof from worldly affairs and is very good to me. Therefore, I want to ask you to make a set of rose-scented makeup for her. Third Miss Qin Jianing loved the scent of roses. She once enviously mentioned of Jiao Rong workshop's rose-scented. Outsiders didn't know that she invested in Jiao Rong workshop, so she naturally wouldn't spread it, but if her sisters mentioned liked it, she wouldn't be stingy. Of the roses workshop, of Jiao Yanyu. I see that young lady's jasmine redding is almost finished, so I'll make some for young lady later. There are a few more scars on your hand. Next time, young lady, please don't do this again. A girl's skin is very delicate, and it's not always possible to successfully remove scars. Next time, if you want to beat someone up, you can use your weapon. Qin Yining laughed. What are you saying? I don't beat people up all the time. That's not necessarily true. If Miss is really angry, who can stop you? Bing Tang joked. Song Lan, Qiu Lu, and Ji Yun also laughed. The atmosphere in the room also lightened up. Qin Yining looked at the girls who were loyal to her and thought of her family. She was even more determined to kill the Demon Empress. She couldn't just sit and wait for death. She couldn't wait for someone to put a knife to her neck before she reacted. It was enough to suffer such a loss once. Qin Huayuan was in the limelight right now. Not only was she the Prime Minister and the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, she was given the title of Marquis of Anping for facilitating the peace talks. She also became Prince Zhongshuan's soon-to-be father-in-law. Her status rose with the tide. Qin Yining not only had the identity of Marquis of Anping's daughter, but she was also given the title of Prince Zhongshuan. Now, she was also a noble person that Tian Jizi calculated could guarantee the peace of the Dian. Even if no son of a noble family dared to offend Prince Zhongshuan and ask for his hand in marriage, her status was still higher among the noble ladies in the capital. In recent days, old Madam and her cousins were polite to her. Even the position of the Sun clan, which was disliked by old madam, was much more stable in the Fu. Chao Yuqing, on the other hand, had been silent for a while because the empress had tortured consort Shu and concubine Xiang to death. The Marquis of Anping's Fu was very popular in the capital. Even Qin Jianing, a girl from the third branch, benefited from eldest uncle's influence. On May 28, third Miss Qin Jianing got married. Qin Huayuan's niece was getting married, and her in-laws were the Count of Jian'an. These two families were both rich and powerful. Marquis of Anping usually acted in a low-key manner. His colleagues didn't even have a chance to curry favor with him. With this opportunity, all the important people in the capital were present. The whole family Qin was unprecedentedly lively and jubilant, which made old madam so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. The Sun clan, second madam, and third madam were busy receiving the guests. They were laughing so hard that they almost had cramps. Third old master was born of a concubine and was a virgin. He was very happy that his daughter was getting married in such a grand way. He was very grateful to his eldest brother. The bridal sedan was carried out of the front gate of the Marquis of Anping's Fu in the evening. Third old master went to entertain the guests with a smile, but third madam silently wiped her tears in the corridor. 8th Miss Qin Baoning, 9th Master Qin Xian, and 10th Master Qin Rong saw their official mother sad and surrounded her to comfort her. The Sun clan and second madam also comforted her with a few words. After they were finally done, the Sun clan took Qin Yining's hand and said with emotion, "My sister Yi has also grown up and will be of marriageable age next month. In a flash, you are already a big girl and can get married. But the days you spend with your mother are so little." The Sun clan helped send off third miss today. Thinking of her own marriage, the decline of her family, her mother and sisters-in-law who were far away in the countryside, and her Qin Yining would fly far away like a little swallow in the future, she couldn't help but feel so sad that tears filled her eyelashes. Qin Yining held the Sun clan's hand and coaxed, "Mother, don't be sad. Although the days I spent with you are not long, the days in the future are still long." Yes, the days are still long. The Sun clan patted the back of Qin Yining's hand comfortingly. She restrained her sharpness and saw the reality clearly. The Sun clan now was completely different from the domineering her in the past. On the day of the return of the three dynasties, Qin Yining met third cousin's husband, second masterly of the Count of Jian'an's mansion. They acknowledged each other and received a red envelope. Qin Yining saw that third miss, who was already dressed as a married woman, always had a faint smile on her face. Only then did she feel relieved. Among their families, how could there be a marriage that didn't involve political and personal interests? Third cousin seemed to be living a good life, so Qin Yining also felt relieved. After everything was done, they returned to the mansion. When things were peaceful in the past, it was almost summer. The big business that Qin Yining arranged for Master Zhong to manage was also beginning to bear fruit. Chapter 178. Head shopkeeper, don't laugh at me. I don't have much experience, and I can only think of a few quick ways to make money. If it wasn't for head shopkeeper's extraordinary abilities, how could an idea be of any use? Qin Yining held a light blue wide sleeve in one hand and a teapot in the other. She poured the green tea into the carp lotus teacup and then brought it to Master Zhong. Master Zhong received it with both hands, overwhelmed by the favor, and repeatedly expressed his thanks. Qin Yining smiled. She picked up the fan like a cat catching a butterfly and waved it twice. The hair hanging down her temples naughtily stuck to her pink cheeks and was carelessly tucked behind her ears. Our Zhaoyun Agency's properties are all recorded in the Imperial House. The Emperor and Empress act without any rules. After several inquiries, I can now conclude that the Emperor does have the intention of plundering the Zhaoyun Agency. That day, he destroyed the Duke Ding Fu so happily. One of the reasons was because the emperor wanted to take the Zhao Yun agency into the internal treasury. But because of his face, my father's identity, and the previous rumors, the emperor can't make a move now. But I think that he won't give up on this idea. While the situation is still stable, we should quickly make money. Hearing the tune, shopkeeper Zhong immediately nodded and said, I understand the meaning of the owner. You can rest assured that the extra money we earned will be accounted for in the accounts of Zhao Yun Bureau. No one will find out about this money. We have made a lot of money using short-term loans. If it is spread, it will attract the hatred of our peers. This matter has to be kept secret. That's good. Qin Yining smiled and waved her silk fan from time to time. She looked past the half-open window lattice and looked at the little girls who were sitting on the steps of the corridor opposite and playing with scratchers. Their hair had yet to grow. The innocent and cheerful laughter of the girls was very infectious, and the smile on her face couldn't help but deepen. When I was young, my adoptive mother also coaxed me to play this game. She would take a few apricot stones and sew them into a small sandbag. The first time, she would grab one, the second time, 2, and 3. When she had grabbed a handful, she would throw the apricot stones up and catch them with the back of her hand. At that time, my hands were small, so I couldn't catch as many as my adoptive mother. I even secretly thought that when I grew up, would definitely surpass my adoptive mother. Unfortunately, she passed away before I grew up. Master Zhong sighed. Boss's adoptive mother must be a very gentle and kind person. Yes, she is a very good person, but in this world, good people always have a hard life. Born in troubled times, there are so many people who have lost their homes. But look, even when de Zhou's soldiers were at the gates, Jingdo was still indulging in a life of luxury. His Majesty is a muddle-headed man. He doesn't have any other skills, but he is an expert at harming loyal and good people. He doesn't see that the people outside are in dire straits, but he keeps an eye on which officials steal his limelight. With such an emperor, the corrupt officials can be at ease and run amok. Qin Yining shook his head and said, Don't look at how peaceful it is right now. If the peace talks succeed, only a portion of the people's glory and wealth will be preserved. The common people will still suffer. When Master Zhong heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. He was very knowledgeable and experienced. Even though he didn't personally live a hard life like Qin Yining, after years of war, it was true that 9 out of 10 houses were empty and starving people were everywhere. In addition, there was very little rain this summer, and many places were already showing signs of drought. The common people's lives were even more difficult. Unfortunately, my abilities are meager. Qin Yining shook his head and laughed. Right now, I don't have the ability to help the world. Sometimes, I even want to beg the heavens to open their eyes and quickly take away the fatuous ruler and the demon empress. AI. Isn't that right? Rather than hoping that the fatuous ruler will be enlightened, it's better to hope that he will reincarnate sooner. I reckon that the common people outside are also thinking the same thing. However, we can't say this out loud. It's better to be careful. Not long ago, 3 storytellers were arrested, and it was said that the contents of their stories were rebellious. He did it himself, yet he doesn't allow others to talk about it. His Majesty wants the common people to be fools. Qin Yining shook his head and sighed. Today, I was feeling emotional, so I came here to nag you. Now that time is still good, let's make some money. In the future, no matter what we do, we will have some capital. We won't have to struggle to make ends meet. Boss, don't worry. This old man doesn't have any other skills, but I do have a brain. Qin Yining nodded. She stood up and said, Of course I trust head shopkeeper's ability. Since it's still early, I plan to go outside the city for a walk. I'll send you off. Please wait. Qin Yining exchanged some pleasantries with Master Zhong, then bid farewell and left the Zhong family. When he reached the main entrance, Ji Yun helped him put on a snow-white veil hat. Bing Tang had been waiting at the entrance with the date-red horse that Huzi had given her for a long time. When White Cloud saw Qin Yining come out, it immediately raised its neck and snorted. Qin Yining chuckled and went forward to untie White Cloud's reins. He gently stroked the silvery white mane on its neck and said with a smile, "Did you get impatient from waiting?" White Cloud intimately rubbed against her cheek. Ji Yun smiled and led her yellow horse over. "Miss, you're even gentler to a horse than to our Wang Yi." If Wang Yi saw this, he might get jealous. "The next time you see Wang Yi, you should at least smile a little more." Qin Yining blushed and said angrily, "You silly girl, did Pang Zhishi specially arrange for you to be by my side and nag all day long?" Ji Yun chuckled. "Miss clearly misses Wang Yi, so you can't blame me for nagging. Ever since you got that red bean bracelet, you haven't worn any other bracelets or bracelets. You've been hugging Air Bai all day long at home and even personally washed Air Bai's plum blossom bracelet. Isn't that because you miss Wang Yi? Naughty girl, if you keep talking, I'll chase you back. I won't take you out to walk the horse." Qin Yining glared at her with a red face. Bing Tang and Ji Yun winked at each other and laughed. Qin Yining nimbly flipped over and leaped onto the horse. "Let's go outside the city for a while before returning to the residence. Old Madam wants to investigate the corruption of the old servants in the kitchen. If we return early, it will be troublesome." Old servant Lu, who was in charge of the comprador in the main kitchen, passed off shoddy goods as good ones and even secretly moved rice grains from the residence into the residence. That day, she was caught red-handed by Ji Yun, who was by Old Madam's side, and returned to Old Madam. After Old Madam knew about it, she immediately made a fuss. For 3 consecutive days, she dragged the Sun Clan, second Old Madam, and third Old Madam to investigate the matters in the residence. Not only did she catch old servant Lu, but she also dug up many of Sesame Grain's messes. Qin Yining watched at home for 2 days and felt a headache. Today, she could only hide. What if Old Madam asks? Just a while ago, Old Madam said that you are not allowed to ride a horse. She thinks that you don't have the appearance of a young lady from a respectable family. Although Ji Yun said this, she nimbly jumped onto the yellow horse. Qin Yining lifted the veil on her veil hat and said with a smile, "If everything depends on what others say, then we don't need to live our lives. Many people have already said bad things about me behind my back. There are all kinds of unpleasant things that they said. If I cared about those, I would have hung myself long ago. If they like it, then I will. If they don't like it, then I won't. Everyone lives their own lives. Who cares about who has a headache?" Ji Yun burst out laughing and urged the horse forward. She and Bing Tang accompanied Qin Yining on the left and right. They chose a secluded road and headed out of the city. When they left the outer city of the capital, there was a bright and beautiful scenery in front of them. The blue sky was clear as if it had been washed, and the green grass was lush and green. Although the weather was hot and stuffy, the 3 of them wore veil hats on their heads to block the sun. When the horses galloped, there was wind, and the white veil on their veil hats and the gauze on their bodies fluttered in the wind. There was an indescribable feeling of coolness and refreshment. The master and servant trio ran wildly along a small path that was shaded by trees beside the official road for a while before they dismounted and rested for a while. They then led the horses to look for a water source. There was little rain this year, and a few streams had already dried up. The original stream path was only left with a shallow layer of muddy water and stones that had been scorching hot from the sun. After stepping on the stones and walking for a while, they finally found the mouth of a spring with gurgling water flowing out. Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun first took out water bags and filled them with water. Then, they let the 3 horses drink water. The 3 of them stood under the shade of a tree and looked at the official road not far away that was dazzling under the sun. Bing Tang could not help but sigh worriedly. It's not good for the drought to continue like this. I'm afraid that the farm's harvest will be affected. It's not just the farm. I heard that many places outside are experiencing drought. If this continues, I'm afraid that there will be a drought. Qin Yining drank another mouthful of water and went forward to hang the water bag on the horse's saddle. Ji Yun slowly put down the water bag and lifted the white veil on her curtain hat. With a light leap, she jumped onto a large tree and shaded her eyes with her hands as she looked in the direction of the official road. Qin Yining asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Ji Yun raised her left hand slightly to signal for them to keep quiet. Qin Yining and Bing Tang immediately felt that something was amiss. They stood under the tree and followed Ji Yun's gaze. From afar, they seemed to see some smoke and dust on the road in the distance. There are many people. Miss, there are many people running in this direction. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. He quickly said, "Quickly take a closer look. Who are they? Are they soldiers or civilians? Are they riding horses?" As Qin Yining spoke, he stretched his neck to take a closer look. However, due to the low-lying terrain, his line of sight was obstructed. After a long time, he could only see a cloud of smoke and dust getting bigger and bigger. They shouldn't be soldiers. Looking at their clothes, they shouldn't be. Miss, let's quickly hide. They will probably run over in a short while. Ji Yun jumped down from the tree and pulled Qin Yining to hide behind them. Bing Tang also quickly led his horse and followed behind them. The 3 of them carefully hid their horses and returned a little. They squatted behind the bushes and secretly looked out. At this moment, the group of people had already arrived in front of them. Upon closer inspection, it was actually a large group of civilians who were in a sorry state. There were more than 1,000 people in the group. There were men and women, old and young, and each of them carried a bundle. Their hair was messy, and their clothes were dirty. Their faces were filled with panic. They supported each other as they ran in the direction of the capital. They were so tired that they were out of breath, but their faces were still pale and they refused to stop. There were old people who ran too slowly and fell to the ground. Before their children could help them up, they were stepped on by the people who rushed over from behind. There were also children who ran away crying loudly for their parents. Such a panicked and chaotic scene made it seem as if there were evil spirits chasing after them. Chapter 179. Bing Tang was very close to Qin Yining, so she heard Qin Yining's words clearly. When she heard that it was a war, she broke out in a cold sweat. Although she was now a servant and had been a Taoist nun for a while, in reality, she was born into a noble family and had not suffered much since she was young. Compared to Qin Yining, who had been a noble family's young lady for less than a year, she was naturally different. Originally, she had only heard of the horror of war, but she had never seen it with her own eyes, so her impression of it was not direct. Even the last time she accompanied Qin Yining to Shihua City for peace talks, she had only seen the vast number of soldiers and generals lined up like the sea. Now, in front of her, there were so many men, women, old and young running like a swarm of bees. They were in such a sorry state that they did not even wait for people to come and kill them. Screams and cries could be heard incessantly, and this was only a short while before they passed by. Where did they come from? Along the way, it was likely that such despairing scenes were happening one after another. For the first time, Bing Tang experienced the fear of impending disaster up close. Miss, what should we do? If little Wang Yi brings people to attack us, will they hurt you? His subordinates might not recognize you. Bing Tang's voice was dry, and his brain was not working properly. It took him a while to form a sentence smoothly. Qin Yining's face was pale. He held Bing Tang's hand with one hand and grabbed his lapel with the other. He rubbed the fabric of his lapel until it looked like dried vegetables before he slowly let go. After taking a few deep breaths, Qin Yining patted Bing Tang's shoulder comfortingly. "Don't be afraid, they won't attack us so quickly. Peng Zhishi and the others have already left Liang City this time. Although the emperor has ceded land as reparations, and the few big cities at the border have been compensated to Dezhou and can be considered Dezhou's territory, the Tiger Army has so many people. It won't be easy for them to attack us in the blink of an eye. But there are so many refugees. It's obvious that they were scared and fled to Beijing." Bing Tang wiped the cold sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. Qin Yining said, "Let's go back first and ask Master Zhong for more information. I also want to hear the news from my father. After all, the information they get is more accurate than our wild guesses." Bing Tang nodded, and then her big round eyes were covered with a layer of mist. Her voice was slightly choked, "But, miss, I still feel cold in my heart." "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." Although Bing Tang was the same age as Qin Yining, she was very young. She looked like an 11 or 12-year-old child. Qin Yining couldn't help but pull her into his arms. He patted her back and said, "If something bad really happens, I will let you go. When the time comes, leave the capital and head in the direction of Nanhai Yanzi." Bing Tang sniffed. "What about the girl?" Qin Yining only smiled bitterly and didn't answer. If something really happened, the masters of the Qin family would not be able to escape. With her father's status and reputation, how could the emperor of Dezhou let them go? "Get up. Let's go back first. We'll talk after we find out more. Maybe I'm thinking too much." Qin Yining stood up with a smile and pulled Bing Tang up. Bing Tang wiped her tears embarrassedly. Compared to Qin Yining's calmness, she was a bit embarrassed. Ji Yun, who was standing to the side, looked at Qin Yining and Bing Tang with a gentle gaze. Seeing the two girls calm down so quickly, she couldn't help but admire them. She came forward and carefully helped Qin Yining remove the grass and twigs from his clothes. The three of them mounted their horses and took a small path to avoid the group of refugees. Then, they rushed back to the capital along the official road. After entering the outer city gates, they immediately rushed to Master Zhong's house. Master Zhong was calculating and checking the accounts when he heard a servant report that Qin Yining had arrived. He went out to welcome them in surprise. When he arrived at the door, he saw that the three of them had extremely ugly expressions. "Boss, what's the matter? Come in and have a cup of tea." Master Zhong hurriedly poured a cup of tea for Qin Yining and handed it to her with both hands. Qin Yining gulped down a large bowl of warm tea. Only then did she slightly recover. She told Master Zhong in detail about what had happened just now. Finally, she said, "I think that group of people will arrive at the city gates soon. Head shopkeeper, please help me investigate their background and situation. Also, pay attention to any other movements. I also need to quickly return to the residence. My father should have dismissed the yamen by now. I need to discuss this with him." When Master Zhong heard this, he was also sweating profusely. He used his slightly trembling hand to wipe his face. He nodded and said, "Yes, I understand. I will immediately go investigate. If there is any news, immediately send it to the residents." "Good. If you can't find me at the last minute, you can tell the people in my house that Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Song Lan, and Qiu Lu are all trustworthy." "Yes." Master Zhong nodded repeatedly. Qin Yining immediately stood up and pulled Bing Tang and Ji Yun out the door. Ji Yun looked at Qin Yining's slender back with a complicated expression. She couldn't help but ask, "Young lady, you still trust me?" Qin Yining stopped in her tracks. She turned around and asked strangely, "What nonsense are you talking about? I was given to young lady by little Wang Yi. I also frequently report young lady's recent situation to little Wang Yi. I thought that if a war really broke out, young lady wouldn't trust me." Qin Yining's expression was somewhat complicated. He stared at Ji Yun for a while before saying, "This is a different matter. I can clearly distinguish between them. Moreover, Peng Zhishi was already de Zhou's Prince Zhongshuan from the first day I met him. He had already led the Tiger Army to flatten many mountains and rivers in Dian. It wasn't the first day I found out about his identity. He also didn't become like this all of a sudden." At this point, Qin Yining faintly sighed. "In the end, we are from different countries. We just have different standpoints. With Emperor Zhou's ambition, he won't be content to stay in one corner of the country. It's also expected that he would target Dian. Not only Dian, but even the Taitan in the north. Even if de Zhou's national strength isn't enough now, this doesn't affect his desire to conquer." Ji Yun looked at Qin Yining and felt heartfelt admiration for him. No wonder Wang Yi valued her so much and pampered and protected her like she was the apple of his eye. She was quick-witted and calm when faced with problems. She wasn't like other girls who were confused by a few things. She looked at things rationally and was able to calmly deal with problems. At this point, Ji Yun had already regarded Qin Yining as her second master. There was no longer any resistance in her heart. The three of them got on their horses and headed towards the Marquis of Anping's residence. The city was still bustling with activity. The passers-by still didn't know that a war was about to happen. There were still stalls and people selling goods in the market. There were still children in tattered clothes chasing and playing on the side of the road. There were also women who pushed open old wooden doors and stuck half of their bodies out to call their children to eat. Seeing all this, Qin Yining's heart tightened. She didn't know what the future would be like. The capital was probably the only place left in the Dian that had such a pure land. Were they about to lose the last pure land in the Dian? The three of them returned to the Marquis's residence. As usual, they walked through the outer courtyard south gate and first sent the horses to the stable. Then, they walked through the corner gate and entered the outer courtyard. Qin Yining casually asked the servant boy in the outer courtyard, "Has the Marquis returned?" "Fourth young mistress, the Marquis is currently in the outer courtyard study." Qin Yining nodded and quickly walked towards the study. Who knew that just as she reached the study, she would see Qin Huayuan come out to greet her. "Father. Are you going out?" Qin Yining saluted. Qin Huayuan smiled and said, "I'm not going out. I'm going to see the old madam. Your grandmother punished a few servants today. She's probably still angry right now. I saw that the group of rooms in the west was in a mess for a while. Someone said that they were going to hang themselves or jump into the river. I was afraid that your grandmother wouldn't handle it well, so I wanted to go take a look." The group of rooms in the west were all occupied by family Qin servants. Some of the servants who brought their families along lived in those rooms. They would only enter the residence when they were on duty. Qin Yining thought about how the outside world was about to become chaotic and how the family was still entangled in these trivial matters. His expression became somewhat ugly. "Father, the matter with the old madam isn't urgent. Daughter has something important to tell you." Qin Yining's expression was extremely grave. Even Qin Huayuan's expression was solemn. "What's wrong? Did something happen outside?" The first thing that came to Qin Huayuan's mind was that the Empress was up to something to harm his daughter. Ever since the Empress's attempt to preserve her beauty with Qin Yining's flesh and blood failed and instead harmed consort Shu and concubine Xiang, not only did the Emperor not punish the Empress, he even doted on the Empress more and more. Qin Huaiyuan had become even more guarded against the emperor and the empress. In addition, he had been in the limelight more and more recently, forming a strong contrast with Chao Guozhang, whose disciple had been demoted and had no official position. Chao Guozhang had once wanted to win him over as his son-in-law, but now it seemed that he wouldn't be able to win him over. The enmity between the two families probably wouldn't be resolved for the rest of their lives. If the Empress and Chao Guozhang worked together, who knew what kind of evil scheme they would come up with? Qin Yining shook his head and said with a serious expression, "Father, I'm afraid that the war has already begun." When Qin Huaiyuan heard this, his usually calm face became grave for a moment. Qin Yining once again described in detail what he had just seen. Qin Huaiyuan paced a few steps with his hands behind his back. His expression became more and more serious. After a long time, he said, "I'm afraid that things are as you have guessed. The war is really about to begin. However, the people from Little Wangyi might not have actually come to the capital. I'm afraid that we can find some clues from those refugees." Qin Yining saw that Qin Huaiyuan didn't seem to be surprised. He couldn't help but ask hesitantly, "Father, aren't you surprised by what happened today?" Qin Huaiyuan smiled bitterly, "I'm not surprised. In fact, when the peace talks began, I was already worried that this day would come. De Zhou used the peace talks to trick our emperor into compensating them with gold and silver. They used the silver we offered to feed their army before attacking us. These words sound like De Zhou's people are too crafty and cunning, and they don't keep their promises. However, all is crafty in war. If I were an official of the Zhou dynasty, I would have done the same thing if I knew that the Yan dynasty's emperor was timid and cowardly. However, since we are in the Yan dynasty, we have no choice but to listen to the emperor's orders. Today, De Zhou's envoy has already left Dian with the last batch of gold and silver as compensation. It's not surprising that the war has begun again. For the latest novel updates, please visit the website. Chapter 180. Qin Yining looked at Qin Huaiyuan's calm expression and could only see bitterness and helplessness in his eyes. Just like how a person cannot choose the family they were born into, the country they were born into, whether the country was strong or weak, whether it was peaceful or at war, there was also no choice. Even if a person was extremely talented, if they were tied down by a fatuous ruler like the Dian emperor, there was nothing they could do. In Qin Yining's opinion, this was even more tragic than a woman marrying the wrong man. "Father, don't be too sad. As a subject, you have already done your best for the emperor. You have already fulfilled your loyalty. The emperor is stubbornly clinging to his own course and is unwilling to make progress, so he can't blame others for grasping his weakness. The two countries have different standpoints in the war. Although we have been implicated by the emperor, that is also our fate." The war had started again. This time, the enemy's troops were heading straight for the capital. If it was an ordinary woman, she would have been scared to tears. However, his daughter was able to see the situation so calmly and was even able to comfort him. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't help but ask, "Sister Yi, aren't you afraid?" Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and said, "Afraid of what?" "You are the daughter of the family Qin. With my identity, you can't even escape. If Little Wang Ye's troops really come to the capital, we will defend the capital with our lives. If we succeed, then everything will be fine. If we fail, then you will be implicated. I'm afraid that the men of our family Qin won't be able to survive. I'm afraid that the women will end up like your maternal grandmother's family. This time, no one will come to save the women of our family like you did when you saved your maternal grandmother. Father, I know what you are saying. However, it is too early to start worrying. Our country hasn't perished yet, right? If our country really perishes and that day really comes, I still have the courage to die. I'm not even afraid of death, so what do I have to be afraid of?" I just need to go all out and fight. Qin Yining's words made Bing Tang and Ji Yun, who were standing behind her, tear up. Qi Tai, who was behind Qin Huayuan, was also moved. Qin Huayuan took 2 deep breaths and ignored the hot tears in his eyes. He suddenly smiled and said, "You're right. Everyone dies eventually, so there's nothing to be afraid of." Qin Yining pursed her lips and smiled. The 2 shallow dimples on her cheeks made her smile look extremely sweet. Qin Huayuan sighed and said, "Let's go. Let's go to Ci Shao Garden first. There will most likely be news from outside soon. I'm afraid that I will be very busy in the coming days. The family must not be in chaos." "Yes. Today, I ran out to walk the horse again. Originally, old madam didn't allow it. She said that I didn't have the manners of a young lady from a respectable family and lost the face of our family Qin. Later, if old madam reprimands me, father will also intercede on behalf of daughter. I've interceded for you many times, but I don't see that you've learned to be obedient." Qin Huayuan laughed. Qin Yining raised her eyebrows proudly. Some little girls were arrogant and willful, but it was also the greatest trust and dependence she had on her father, Qin Huayuan. In the past, she wouldn't have been like this. In order to survive outside, she had to be careful in everything she did. If it weren't for someone who doted on and protected her, she wouldn't be so assured to cause trouble. However, she didn't know how long this protection could last in the face of war and the powerful and unreasonable imperial power. Father and daughter returned to the inner residence together. As soon as they arrived at the Chuehua gate, they heard the sound of flogging and the screams of old women begging for mercy. Qin Huayuan and Qin Yining entered the Chuehua gate one after the other. The old women in charge of the punishment saw them and stopped to salute them. Qin Huayuan frowned and said, "What's going on?" Replying to the marquis, it was the old madam who ordered these people to be flogged 50 times and driven out. Qin Yining looked carefully and saw that the people being flogged were actually Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Kai Lan, who served the Sun clan. She had only gone out for a while, so how did the people of the Sun clan get flogged? Qin Huayuan naturally saw that it was the wet nurse and maidservant of the Sun clan who were being flogged. He said unhappily, "After 50 floggings, they're dead. Rather than driving them out, it's better to say that they're disposing of their corpses." Normally, Qin Huayuan wouldn't say this in front of the old madam and embarrass her. However, now that the war outside had started again and the imperial court was about to face chaos again, not to mention the servants, even the masters were in a precarious situation. He couldn't bear to see these ruthless beatings and killings. He felt that with the chaos outside and the inner residence, one wave after another, it was really annoying. Qin Huayuan walked towards Ci Shao Garden with his hands behind his back. When he said this, the biddy in charge of the punishment didn't know whether to continue the flogging or not. She just stood there blankly. Fortunately, Qin Yining reminded her, "Do you still not understand father's words? Don't flog them anymore. First, call the doctor to take a look." Only then did the old maidservant regain her confidence and respond. Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Kai Lan, who were being flogged, all breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Qin Yining was here, they would be saved. She knelt on the ground and repeatedly kowtowed to Qin Huayuan and Qin Yining, "Many thanks to the marquis. Many thanks to fourth young miss for not killing us." Qin Yining squatted down to support Mother Jean. "How could this be? I only went out for a while. How could you be flogged?" Mother Jean gritted her teeth. Her face was pale from the pain, and cold sweat continuously flowed down. Yes, it was the old madam. She said that madam had embezzled the monthly allowance of the Huaning girls in the fields. Since madam didn't do it, she naturally didn't admit it. The old madam found out that it was us who did it. Thus, she became angry. Mother Jin's words were intermittent. It could be seen that she had been flogged fiercely. Qin Yining knew that the old madam was looking for trouble to target the Sun clan. He didn't dare to touch the Sun clan, so he used the servants as a raft. He didn't ask any more questions and hurriedly urged Bing Tang to quickly come and take a look. In the courtyard, Qin Huayuan had already walked to the corridor. The maidservant replied inside, "The Marquis has returned." Then, she respectfully lifted the door curtain. With a calm face, Qin Huayuan went straight to the side room where the old madam usually held banquets. He saw the old madam sitting cross-legged on the Arhat bed. The Sun clan was kneeling on the ground and sobbing. Third madam was kneeling beside the Sun clan and was gently comforting them. Second madam was beside the old madam, bowing and pleading for leniency. Qin Huayuan came in and only heard the last sentence. After all, those people were brought by eldest sister-in-law. There's no one left in Duke Dinghua's Fu. The old madam should leave the accompanying room for eldest sister-in-law. The old madam slammed the table. There's no one left in Duke Dinghua's Fu. Could it be that there's no one left in our family, Qin? Are we going to condone those wicked servants to mistreat my sister Hui? Qin Huayuan came in and didn't salute. He sat down on the armchair at the side and pushed away the teacup that Mammy Qin had brought over. He said coldly, "If this continues, the family Qin won't be far from having no one left." The old madam choked and stared at Qin Huayuan in disbelief. Qin Huayuan rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said tiredly, "Mother, the matters in the inner residence are chaotic. I know that Mother has worked hard. It's right to deal with the corrupt comprador. But how can innocent people be involved? Now that the war has started again, the soldiers will soon arrive at the city gate. We don't know where our family's future lies. Why can't Mother be considerate of your son and make less trouble? If Mother does this, where will your son be?" Hearing this, the old madam was stunned. Then, her whole body trembled and she said with a pale face, "Brother Meng, what did you say? What soldiers will arrive at the city gate?" All the womenfolk also stopped talking and looked at Qin Huayuan in horror. Just at this moment, a burst of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside. Chi Tai forgot to report and quickly ran to the corridor. He lifted the curtain and knelt behind the screen in the outer room. He said with a trembling voice, "Marquis." Little Wang Yi led 10,000 men of the Tiger Army to launch a surprise attack on the right sentry camp of the 5 army camps on the outskirts of the capital. All of their provisions and supplies were stolen. The right sentry camp was completely wiped out. Hearing this, Qin Huayuan closed his eyes in exhaustion. The old madam cried out in alarm, "Heavens! Then wouldn't the capital?" Then, she started to cry. "What should we do? The people of the Zhou dynasty attacked us. They didn't keep their word. Those bastards." Hearing this, the womenfolk were so scared that their bones went soft. They collapsed on the ground and cried while holding their heads. Qin Huayuan stood up and went to the outer room. Ignoring the weeping of the womenfolk inside, he said, "Stand up and reply." "Yes." Chi Tai stood up and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. "What's the specific situation? Where did the Tiger Army go after they attacked the camp? Did they head straight for the capital?" Replying to Marquis, "Our people found out that after the Tiger Army attacked the camp, they headed straight for Xihua City. This time, they launched a surprise attack with 10,000 cavalry. They stole the provisions and left. Right now, the supply route between Xihua City and the capital has been occupied. The surprise cavalry attacked from the rear of Xihua City and the Tiger Army, who was heading straight for the south gate of Xihua City, attacked from the front and rear. Without the supplies from the rear, Xihua City will fall in a few days. The capital will be next. Chi Tai lowered his head. He was anxious and sad. Tears almost flowed down his face. Qin Huaiyuan sighed. That Pang Zhishi knows how to fight. Are there any refugees in the city? Yes, the emperor already knows about this. He also knows that refugees are coming to the capital. Right now, he has already ordered the outer city gates to be opened. The streets are full of refugees. The emperor arranged for the capital governor to lead the 5 cities' warden's office to set up a settlement. Right now. Before Chi Tai could finish speaking, someone rushed in from outside. Marquis. What's the matter? Qin Huaiyuan stood with his hands behind his back. He looked calmly at the door. The servant saluted and said, "Someone from the palace came." The emperor asked Marquis to enter the palace immediately. I know. Qin Huaiyuan pursed his lips and ordered Chi Tai, "Go and get my official robes." Yes. Chi Tai saluted and rushed to get the official robes and prepare the carriage. Qin Huaiyuan turned and entered the room. Looking at the womenfolk who were crying in fear, he said in a deep voice, "From now on, nothing is allowed to happen in the family." Presumably, everyone heard what Chi Tai said clearly. If Shihua City falls, the capital will be next. The refugees have already flooded into the capital. You all need to take care of your own people. From now on, strengthen the defense of the mansion. Even if you want to go out, you must be careful. He turned to the old madam and said, "Mother, you are old. You shouldn't worry about these things. From now on, everything in the inner residence will be handled by Sister Yi." Qin Huaiyuan turned and called Qin Yining, who had been standing at the door. "Come here." Qin Yining walked quickly to Qin Huaiyuan. "Father." Chapter 181. Qin Yining clenched her fists, and her palms were soaked with sweat. She was not afraid of the head of the family, nor was she afraid that as an unmarried woman, she would be dissatisfied if she controlled her elders. What she cared about was that her father had said, "I'm afraid the emperor will take his anger out on you. If that happens, it will be disastrous." The emperor would take his anger out on her. Naturally, he would take his anger out on Pang Zhao's surprise attack. In her previous life, as Pang Zhao, the people she liked could bring her benefits, but once the war started, they would bring her a lot of trouble. She, as a woman of the boudoir, was already like this, not to mention her father, who was the one in charge of the peace talks. Although De Zhou couldn't blame Qin Huaiyuan for breaching the peace talks, wouldn't the emperor take his anger out on her? Pang Zhao was close to her, and before the war, the emperor would think that a marriage alliance was a good thing. But now that Pang Zhao had led the Tiger Army to attack again, how could the emperor not hold any grudges against her? Wouldn't Chao Guozhang and the empress take the opportunity to add fuel to the fire? Her father probably also understood this, which was why he had said things like, "It will be disastrous." Moreover, her father had said that before he came back, he wanted her to take care of the family. His words had the meaning of entrusting her to him, and he was clearly afraid that he wouldn't be able to come back. Qin Yining had already understood her father's words to mean that if he wasn't here, she would have to take care of the family and do her best to protect them. Qin Yining's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and her back was cold and wet. Even her inner clothes were soaked. Qin Huaiyuan saw that his daughter's face was calm, but her face was pale, and he couldn't help but feel distressed and guilty. How old was she? It hadn't even been a year since she returned home. She hadn't had many good days, but things had happened one after another. Now, she was in danger and had to take care of such a big mess. Even a man wouldn't be able to withstand this kind of pressure, but he had to force his daughter to bear it. Qin Huaiyuan patted Qin Yining's shoulder, unable to hide his sadness. He called out softly, "Sister Yi," and said nothing else. Qin Yining looked calmer and calmer. He looked at Qin Huaiyuan seriously and said, "Don't worry, father. With your words, I will do my best to take care of this family and wait for your return." "Yes. You." "No." Before Qin Huaiyuan could finish his words, he was sternly stopped by the old madam who had suddenly regained her senses. "Brother Meng, what do you mean by this? Do you think your old mother is already dead?" Old madam stood up, her finger trembling as she pointed at Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan didn't evade or give way. He only said, "Mother, do you believe in your son's ability?" The old madam was full of resentment, but she had to nod and admit that Qin Huaiyuan had always been reliable. He was smart enough and knew how to size up the situation. "Mother, your son is the head of the family Qin. In times of danger, I must ensure the safety of the entire family. Everything I do is for the sake of the family Qin. I know that mother is uncomfortable. Perhaps second sister-in-law and third sister-in-law are not convinced that the authority to manage the inner residence will be given to a little girl." Second madam and third madam were indeed uncomfortable, but when Qin Huaiyuan questioned them, they didn't know what to say. Especially third madam. A few days ago, third miss got married because of Qin Huaiyuan. The couple had always been grateful. Qin Huaiyuan said, "Although Sister Yi is inexperienced, I believe that with the old madam and everyone here, Sister Yi's ability to comprehend will not be a big problem. Now that the world is in chaos, the family Qin is at the heart of the struggle because of me. If our family's residence can't be airtight, I'm afraid it will attract disaster. Sister Yi has been studying with me for a while. She is already very good at criticizing the current situation. She is quick-witted and can deal with unexpected situations. Therefore, I temporarily gave the authority to manage the inner residence to her. When the storm passes and the court calms down, these matters will be handed over to the old madam and you guys to worry about." Qin Huaiyuan's words couldn't be more clear. Now that the court situation wasn't good, people who didn't understand court affairs couldn't cooperate with him. He was afraid it would attract disaster. Seeing that the old madam, second madam, and third madam all lowered their heads in tacit agreement, Qin Huaiyuan was relieved. He patted Qin Yining's shoulder and instructed, "Give the matching tiles to Sister Yi in front of me." The old madam's complexion was ashen. She was extremely dissatisfied with her son's decision. But in the end, there was nothing she could do. The old madam had to admit that Qin Huaiyuan's judgment was correct. Among the women in this family, Qin Yining was indeed the one who was most sensitive to court affairs. In the past, he was the housekeeper of the Sun clan. Ever since the collapse of Duke Dinggua's estate, the matching tiles returned to the old madam's hands. Now that Qin Huaiyuan had spoken, the old madam could only reluctantly hand it over. Qin Yining took the box and looked at the shiny wooden tiles that had been rubbed by generations of people. He smiled at Qin Huaiyuan and said, "Father, don't worry. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. You'll be back soon." "That's right." Qin Huaiyuan also smiled. At this time, Qi Tai had already arrived with the official's robes. Qin Huaiyuan went to the side room and quickly tidied everything up. Even if he had 1,000 words to say, he didn't have time to say another word before he left with his people. Qin Yining watched as Qin Huaiyuan walked away. Only then did she turn around to help the members of the Sun clan stand up. She saw that the old madam, second madam, and third madam were all gloomy. Perhaps they were dissatisfied with the fact that she was in charge of the matching tiles, or perhaps they were worried about their future. In short, no one was happy. Qin Yining also didn't want to touch bad luck at this time, so she only said, "The old madam is also tired. Granddaughter won't disturb the old madam's rest. Mother, I will take my leave first." When the old madam heard this, she waved her hand tiredly. It was fine that she was angry just now, but now that such a big matter had happened and Qin Huaiyuan had been urgently summoned by the emperor to the palace, she didn't know what would happen. Qin Huaiyuan even used that kind of tone just now. The old madam was only left with fear. How could she care about anything else? Qin Yining helped the members of the Sun clan out of the door. As he walked, he wiped her tears and advised in a low voice, "Mother, don't worry. Bing Tang and Ji Yun have already sent Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Kai Lan back to Xingning Garden for treatment. Presumably, their injuries won't threaten their lives. No matter what the old madam was thinking about today's matter, this isn't the time for us to fuss about it. Mother, please bear with it for the time being." "I know." The members of the Sun clan sniffled. She was full of grievances, but she still nodded in understanding. "Your father's words just now were very clear. If Dian is really destroyed, once Emperor Zhou comes to settle the score, none of us will be able to survive. What's the point of fuss about such trivial matters at this time?" Mother's words are very true. Qin Yining was very moved by the growth of the Sun clan during this period of time. He smiled and said, "Mother, don't be afraid. In any case, I'm still the protective talisman that can guarantee the fate of Dian. This was personally calculated by Tian Jizi. In any case, it can protect your safety." The members of the Sun clan said worriedly, "I'm just afraid that the emperor will think of little Wang Ye's matter and take his anger out on you. The closer it is to this time, the more scared the emperor will be. He won't do anything to me. Mother, you don't have to worry." Qin Yining comforted the members of the Sun clan and called for a young maidservant. "Go to the Shuan pavilion and tell Song Lan and Qiu Lu to come to Xingning Garden. At this time, only Mother Zhu will be left to look after the house. Also, tell the senior servants in charge to come to Xingning Garden in the early evening. I have something to tell them." Qin Yining was now the young miss of the family, so she was naturally different from usual. The young maidservant immediately bowed and respectfully retreated. Chapter 182. When Qin Yining and the Sun clan returned to Xingning Garden, they first went to check on Mother Jean, Kai Ju, and Kai Lan's injuries. The rough servant obeyed old madam's orders and didn't go easy on them, giving them a total of 50 strokes. When Qin Yining came back, he was halfway there. Fortunately, the rough servant didn't want to take their lives. Otherwise, she would have hit their tailbone and lumbar vertebrae, which would be enough to paralyze them. Even so, more than 20 strokes were enough to make the three suffer. Kai Ju and Kai Lan were young, so they were better off. However, Mother Jean suffered. Not to mention that her old body wasn't as good as the young people, she was also a person with a reputation in the Fu. This time, she was pressed down and beaten in the alley in front of Chuehua Gate with so many pairs of eyes staring at her. It really made her lose all her face. The three people's injuries caused a high fever, and Mother Jin's condition was especially serious. Bing Tang and the doctor carefully examined the three people, applied medicine, and went to boil the medicine. The Sun clan squatted in front of the sick bed and tightly held Mother Jin's hand. "Nanny, nothing must happen to you. After leaving the Fu, you are the only one by my side. I'm useless and have implicated you." As she spoke, tears streamed down. Mother Jin's lips were dry, and her tongue almost couldn't move. Lying on the bed, she struggled to turn her neck and reluctantly said, "Foreign, don't cry. This servant is fine." "Ah." That voice was so weak that it sounded like she would die at any time. The Sun clan was so scared that tears fell like rain. Qin Yining brought a chair for the Sun clan and helped her sit up. He also took a wet handkerchief and handed it to her to wipe her face. Then, he squatted in front of the bed and looked at Mother Jean at eye level, holding her hand. "Mother Jean, don't worry. Now that father has handed the right cards to me, I will be in charge of the household for a period of time. I will definitely seek justice for you. I will not let off the scoundrel in the inner residence who loves to gossip and stir up trouble. You just have to take care of your health. Not only for my mother's sake, but also for your own. Although the world is in chaos, as long as I am here, I will fight for you. I will definitely not abandon you. Mother Jean was moved when she heard this. Tears were about to fall from her eyes as she said in a dry and hoarse voice, "This servant thanks Fourth Mississippi. These days, I'm afraid that there won't be anyone close to Madam to serve her, so Miss will have to be careful. Don't worry, I have arranged for the maidservants of the Shuoren house to serve you. They are all trustworthy." Mother Jean nodded, "That's good." Mother Jean was old and heavily injured, so she quickly fell asleep. Qin Yining then instructed Bing Tang, "Take good care of him. Miss, don't worry. I may not be able to do other things, but this is not a problem for me." Qin Yining then called for Ji Yun to go outside and whispered to her in a quiet voice, "Now that the world is about to change, I'm afraid that the family Qin will be watched by many people with ulterior motives. Your messenger pigeons can no longer be used in the future. Otherwise, I'm afraid that you will attract a fatal disaster." Ji Yun was startled and quickly nodded, "Miss is very thoughtful. What you say is very true. This servant will definitely be careful in the future." Qin Yining then nodded. They sat down in a side room and took a sip of tea. After resting for a while, someone outside replied, "Fourth Miss, the housekeeper and the daughters-in-law have arrived. Have them all go to the main hall. I will be there shortly." "Yes." Qin Yining stood up, and Song Lan immediately took out the lake blue plain makeup cloak she had brought to serve Qin Yining. She then redid her long hair into a bun and secured it with a silver butterfly hairpin with pearl tassels. The pearl tassels hung behind her ears and matched the pearl earrings on her ears. They glowed with an elegant and soft light, simple yet noble. Qin Yining also specially used lipstick and eyebrow makeup from Jiao Rong workshop. She usually did not use these things and was used to using some reeds to moisturize her skin. Today, she was afraid that she would not be able to control herself due to her young age, so she put some thought into it. Her willowy eyebrows were drawn diagonally to her temples, and with the rose-red lipstick, her entire face lit up. It was beautiful but not seductive, and it added a bit of a fierce aura. "Miss, this servant will go with you later." Song Lan helped Qin Yining tie up her white muslin shawl, then took out a begonia-shaped silk fan and presented it to her with both hands. Qin Yining took the fan, then hugged Airbai, who had been lying on the table and staring at her with its big black eyes, in her arms and stroked its fur. "You are too considerate. Today, even if you did not ask, I would have asked you to come along. I only know the names of the old people in the residence, but I do not know the details. Help me keep an eye on them." Upon hearing this, Song Lan smiled and nodded. Usually, when Qin Yining went out of the residence, he brought along Bing Tang and Ji Yun. Song Lan and Qiu Lu did not complain, because Qin Yining knew how to make good use of people. If he needed protection when going out, it was naturally more convenient to bring along Ji Yun, who knew martial arts. When discussing matters at home, he would look for Song Lan, who was intelligent, resourceful, and understood the people in the residence. Qiu Lu was intelligent and meticulous, but she was a dull and quiet person. Therefore, Qiu Lu was in charge of all the important things. As for the jade zither and jade chess pieces that her father had bestowed upon her, Qin Yining treated them as teachers to teach her how to play the zither and chess, and had always treated them with respect. Therefore, although there were many senior servant girls in the master pavilion, they all got along well with each other, and there was no such thing as stealing the limelight from others. Qin Yining thought for a while, then called for Ji Yun to bring out the cards, and the three of them went to the main hall. At this time, the servants and daughters-in-law of the various branches and courtyards were all in the courtyard in front of the main hall. More than a dozen of them were whispering to each other in groups of 2 or 3. When they found out that the Marquis had handed over the cards to the fourth Miss, they were surprised, but also a little frightened. The fourth Miss was a famous savage tyrant. She was very fierce, and she would beat people up with a fierce look. In the past, when Miss Heartwarming was still alive, she would beat her up as she pleased, let alone them. The fourth Miss is here. The little girl at the moon gate said loudly. The servants and daughters-in-law hurriedly stood up, and all of them stole a glance at the moon gate. They saw the fourth Miss holding a palm-sized rabbit, and slowly walking over with 2 beautiful servant girls. With the green bushes as the background and the snow-white moon gate as the backdrop, the 3 of them were like spring onions, and people could not help but take a few more glances. However, when their eyes lingered on Enchanting's face, the servant girls subconsciously lowered their heads. This person clearly did not get angry, and his smile was very gentle, but they felt as nervous as when facing the Marquis, afraid that they would say or do something wrong. 2 second-class servant girls carried out an armchair from the room and placed it in the corridor of the main hall. They also placed a tall black table on one side, and served tea. Enchanting sat on the chair, placed the well-behaved Airby on his lap, and gently stroked its fur. He observed the dozen of people in the corridor, and slowly opened his mouth. Today, I have invited all the mothers and sisters-in-law here. I think you all know that I will be in charge of this mansion for a few days. Yes. The servant girls replied in unison. I am young and ignorant, but I have been entrusted with an important task by my father. In the coming days, I will need all of your help. We do not dare. Enchanting smiled and said, everyone here has been in the mansion for a long time, so I will not mention the rules. I will only emphasize a few things. First, from today onwards, no one in the mansion is allowed to go outside if they have no business. It is also strictly prohibited to secretly keep or receive things. The guards must keep a close eye on the doors, and unlock them at 5 in the morning and unlock them at 7 in the evening. On weekdays, all the doors of the courtyards must be locked. No one is allowed to enter or leave as they wish to pass on items or information. In such a large mansion, it was inevitable that the servants would be lazy, sneak away during work, or wander around the courtyards. Originally, the rules proposed by Enchanting were not strange, and the servants were supposed to follow them. However, everyone was used to being undisciplined, and when they suddenly heard these requirements, they could not help but feel dissatisfied. I know that there are some among you who are dissatisfied. But that is not important. It just so happens that I also have the intention of pruning the branches and pruning the leaves. If any of you want to leave the mansion, feel free to do so. If I catch you, you will be beaten 20 times with the plank and thrown out. If anyone catches the person who made the mistake and returns to me, I will reward you with 20 taels of silver. When these words were said, the servant girls could not help but shiver. This young lady was indeed as fierce as the rumors said. However, a reward of 20 taels of silver was also very attractive. They could not save up 20 taels of silver in a year. Second, from today onwards, the security of the mansion will be tripled. No matter if it is the inner courtyard or the outer courtyard, you will have to watch the door at night to prevent drinking and playing cards. If I catch you drinking and playing cards delaying your work, you will be beaten 20 times with the plank and thrown out. In addition, the guards will have to record in detail what time period they are on duty, who is on duty, and what position they are on duty at. They must all be recorded in detail and handed to me to check and verify every day. If you are supposed to be off duty but have to work more because of my orders, you will receive 3 times the pay for the processing time. Those who are on night patrol will receive an extra midnight snack. When the servant girls heard this, they looked at each other in dismay. In the mansion, there had never been a case of 3 times the pay for temporary processing and a midnight snack. Although this young lady looked fierce, she was also very clear about rewards and punishments. The original rules of the mansion will not change. Every day, I will listen to matters in the main hall of Xingning Garden. I will wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning to listen to the matters of the previous day and night. I will also deploy the matters that need to be paid attention to next. If you want to come back to collect or buy something, you should try your best to come back at this time. If you can't make it in time, and if it is not urgent, you can come back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Do you remember? We understand. The servant girls replied in unison. Qin Yining stood up and slowly paced back and forth with Bai in her arms. She said, "In the days that I am in charge of the mansion, we should all do our jobs well and leave each other some dignity. As long as you don't make any mistakes, I don't want to create trouble and increase my infamy. However, you all know that my temper is not very good. If you really do make a mistake, don't think that you can escape from my eyes. I know how the people below and outside talk about me. I already have an infamy, so I am not afraid. We will follow young lady's orders." After a round of reprimanding, everyone was completely convinced by Qin Yining. When Qin Yining saw everyone's attitude, her tense body relaxed slightly. She had never managed so many people before. In the face of danger, she could only give out orders that she thought of. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing. Now that she saw that everyone was still obedient, she finally let out a sigh of relief. Outside the Moon Gate, the members of the Sun clan saw that Qin Yining was handling the situation with ease and couldn't help but reveal a smile. They felt relieved and went back to take care of Mother Jean. After that, Qin Yining listened to the replies of the various servants and daughters-in-law and made some orders. She also sent people to stand guard outside the palace gates and quietly wait for news from Qin Huayuan. Chapter 183. Second Master Qin Shouyuan's study was located in the east side of the outer courtyard. It was separated from Qin Huayuan's study by a single wall. At this time, Second Master, Third Master, First Master Yu, and Second Master Han were all gathered here to listen to the servant's report. The servant carefully told him how Qin Yining had reprimanded the servants and what rules she had set, without missing a single detail. Second Master and Third Master couldn't help but nod as they listened. When the servant was dismissed, the two of them let out a long sigh of relief. Eldest brother really has a unique vision. This arrangement is very good. Qin Han smiled and said, "That's right. Eldest uncle really has foresight. I just said that father's worries were unnecessary. Fourth sister is a shrewd and powerful person. This arrangement can't be said to be airtight, but it can still prevent a lot of trouble. It's better than us being unable to take care of things outside. With fourth sister in charge of the inner courtyard, even if she doesn't manage the inner courtyard well, at least she won't do anything stupid." "That's right." Third Master also said, "This way, we don't have to worry about things happening in the inner courtyard. With Sister E in charge, we can also save some trouble." Second Master nodded and couldn't help but worry, "I don't know if His Majesty will blame eldest brother. I really didn't expect Zhou to tear up the peace talks so quickly. That Lian Xingjie was eating and drinking well in our dian and was accompanied by beautiful women. His Majesty wholeheartedly wanted to be on good terms with Zhou, so he naturally did his best to entertain him. He really treated the Lian Xingjie as a distinguished guest. Who would have thought that right after he left with the last sum of compensation, Prince Zhongshuan would attack? This is something that can't be helped. It's not something that you and I can control. Right now, I'm worried about eldest uncle. We all know His Majesty's temperament. That person surnamed Yun has repeatedly shown special treatment for fourth sister. I'm afraid His Majesty will take his anger out on her, Qin Yu said worriedly. Qin Yu's words caused everyone present to frown and fall silent. They were actually very afraid. Because the Ding general manor was exterminated, the smell of blood seemed to have not dissipated. His Majesty has always been temperamental, it's not something you and I can control. If that's really the case, we have no other choice. Was Ding General Duke's mansion powerful? In the end, they were still caught unprepared. What a pity for the great men of the Sun family. When Third Master thought of the miserable state of the Sun family, he felt a wave of sadness in his heart. Qin Han also said, "Also, Father, you've just stabilized your position as the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue. If the Emperor really gets angry and takes his anger out on our family, I'm afraid that the promotion that Father worked so hard to obtain will also go down the drain." Speaking of this, who could be more depressed than Second Master? But with the current situation, what could they do? At this critical juncture, we have to thank the heavens for keeping our lives. What I'm afraid of is not whether or not I can keep my official position. What I'm most afraid of is the lives of our family members. We still don't know how Big Brother is doing in the palace. It's useless for us to let our imaginations run wild here. It's better for us to return to our rooms now and tell the womenfolk to listen to Sister Yi's arrangements. In any case, we have to survive this crisis first. Second brother is right. Third Master nodded in agreement. The men discussed and ordered people to wait outside the palace gates for news from Qin Huayuan. Second Master and Third Master returned to their respective courtyards. They called their wives and children to their sides and gave them a good warning. There were some words that would cause panic among the womenfolk, so Second Master and Third Master didn't speak too clearly. But the feeling of an impending storm still lingered in everyone's hearts. Everyone knew that if they weren't alert at this time, they would be killed. Therefore, their dissatisfaction with Qin Yining being the head of the family was gradually replaced by panic. Percent in Xingning Garden, Song Lan and Qin Yining carefully reported the information they received from the second and third branches. In the end, they couldn't help but praise, "I didn't expect Second Master and Third Master to be so insightful." That's natural. Second uncle is a third-rank official in the imperial court. Of course, he's clear-headed. Third uncle is able to do business so well. He must be a smart person. When it comes to judging the situation and sizing up the situation, they're already very good at it. Coupled with their years of experience, they can see the current situation clearly. That's right. When outsiders talk about family Qin, who doesn't jump up and praise them? The three masters are all outstanding people, especially the Marquis, Qiu Lu said from the side. Qin Yining smiled when he heard this. Looking at the dark sky outside, Qin Yining's heart became more and more anxious. The people we send out haven't received any news from Father yet. No. The Marquis hasn't left. Marquis has not left the palace. Qi Tai is waiting outside the palace now. He is anxious. Qin Yining could only nod when he heard this. Qin Yining's heart was hanging in the air. She really wanted to rush into the palace and kill the incapable ruler and the demon empress. Without them, the family Qin's crisis could be mostly resolved. Killing them could be considered as eliminating a threat for the Dian people. Qin Yining's face gradually darkened. This was the first time she had such an obvious intention to kill the incapable ruler and the demon empress. Now, she could somewhat understand her grandmother's actions. The lives of her entire family were in the hands of the incapable ruler and the demon empress. The feeling of being a fish on the chopping block was too unbearable. Qin Yining would rather be the chopping block, even if this idea was treacherous. Qin Yining narrowed her eyes. The night was long, but the more she thought, the more spirited she became. Many ideas gradually formed in her mind. Although the cards in her hands weren't good, they were enough for her to fight with all her might. Perhaps her rebellious heart couldn't be tolerated by heaven and earth, but so what? She only thought that she was planning to eliminate a threat for the people. In the dead of night, the members of the Sun clan had already fallen asleep due to exhaustion. Qin Yining guarded a silk lamp. Even though she had the soft and cute air by in her arms and was accompanied by a considerate maidservant, she couldn't be at ease as long as Qin Huayuan didn't return. She could only comfort herself that no news was the best news. And this self-comforting method was used on the Dowager Duchess the next morning. The next morning, Qin Yining had just gotten up when the Dowager Duchess sent someone to summon her. As soon as she entered, she saw Mammy Qin waiting on the other side of the screen. She gave Qin Yining a meaningful glance. Qin Yining blinked and nodded in understanding. Bypassing the screen that was filled with joy, she went straight to the old madam's side and curtsied, "Old madam." She then took the headband from the head maidservant Ji Xiang's hands and helped the old madam put it on. The Dowager Duchess frowned. "Sister Yi, your father didn't come back last night. Until now, there hasn't been any news. I just asked your second uncle. Your second uncle also said that there hasn't been any news from the palace. Why do you think His Majesty is looking for your father? Could it be, could it be?" As the Dowager Duchess spoke, tears began to swirl in her eyes. At this time, no benefits or power were more important than Qin Huayuan's safety in the Dowager Duchess's heart. She didn't care who was in charge of the Dowager Duchess anymore. Now, she only hoped that her son could return safely and stay by her side like before. Qin Yining hurriedly took out a handkerchief to wipe the Dowager Duchess's tears and comforted her. "Dowager Duchess loves my father too much. That's why you're worried. At this time, no news is the best news. Dowager Duchess has also heard about what happened outside, right?" Chapter 184. Old Madam is right. Moreover, this is only the beginning. When there is progress in Xihua City, I'm afraid that it will be even more chaotic later. There will be more people fleeing. However, Old Madam should be more open-minded. Father has assisted His Majesty for so many years and is one of His Majesty's capable officials. If the situation is really chaotic to that extent, I'm afraid that His Majesty will have to rely on my father's intelligence and wisdom many times. Since my father is a useful person, his life will naturally be safe. At most, His Majesty will reprimand him a few times. Your analysis is also right. Although the situation was tense, Old Madam felt carefree after listening to Qin Yining's explanation. Her tense expression also slightly relaxed. As long as he is still alive, nothing else matters. I don't care about high positions and generous salaries. I just hope that this family will be safe and sound. Mammy Qin saw that Qin Yining coaxed the frowning old madam into a better mood with just a few words. She was very grateful in her heart and smiled at Qin Yining with gratitude and admiration. She brought over a cup of cow's milk and bird's nest and handed it to Qin Yining. Then, she massaged old madam's shoulders. "Look, old madam is happy now. In this servant's opinion, fourth young lady is just like Marquis in the past. It doesn't matter if old madam misses Marquis. Not to mention that Marquis may come back in the blink of an eye. Even if Marquis doesn't come back, there is still fourth young lady." Old madam looked at Qin Yining's handsome face and her mood became a lot better. Qin Yining smiled and scooped a spoonful of cow's milk and bird's nest to feed old madam. "Old madam, have a bite." Seeing that old madam was willing to eat, she continued to feed her while persuading, "You just have to worry about living your life peacefully and take good care of yourself. Us women will work together to stabilize the inner residence. Father, uncle, and cousin will also have no worries when they do things outside. You are the backbone of our family. As long as you keep watch with a healthy body, it will be like the Dragon Palace has a sea-stabilizing divine needle. No matter what happens outside, they won't be able to stir up big waves. While persuading, she coaxed Old Madam to eat cow milk, bird's nest, and snacks. Old Madam liked Qin Yining even more after breakfast. Usually, their standpoints were different. Old Madam hated the Sun Clan, but Qin Yining sided with the Sun Clan. He had disgraced Old Madam several times, so naturally, the relationship between the grandfather and grandson was very stiff. But now, they were on the same side. They were all doing this for the sake of this family. Moreover, Qin Yining's intelligence, which was hated by Old Madam in the past, had now become the backbone that could support her. Therefore, Old Madam's feelings towards Qin Yining were different. However, as Qi Tai rushed back to reply, his heart, which was hanging in the air for Qin Huayuan, tightened again. Just after lunch, Qin Yining was planning to take a nap when a young maidservant ran in outside and reported, "Friend, Miss, Qi Tai is back. He's heading towards the inner residence, towards Ci Shao Garden." The Sun Clan and Qin Yining looked at each other, then hurriedly dressed and went to Ci Shao Garden. Second Furen, Third Furen, Yuta Furen, Han Er Furen, and several young ladies all rushed over. Even Yuta Furen and Han Er Furen, who were often in the outer courtyard, were also there. Qi Tai knelt on the ground and said, "Old Madam. Speak quickly. How is Meng Gu Er?" Old Madam stood up and tightly grabbed Mammy Qin's hand. Qi Tai kowtowed and said, "We just received the news. Marquis Yi was reprimanded by the Emperor. He dismissed the Crown Prince's Grand Preceptor and the Prime Minister, but retained the title of Marquis of Anping. He was sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison. Although he wasn't clearly convicted and wasn't put on trial, he said that he wanted Marquis Yi to reflect on himself. Right now, Marquis Yi's life is in good condition, but the Emperor doesn't know when his dragon nature will disappear. He also doesn't know when Marquis Yi will be released." Hearing this, Old Madam's vision turned black. She only cried out, "My son," and then fainted. The Sun Clan covered their mouths and cried. The womenfolk in the room all had tears streaming down their faces. They were panic-stricken. Some went to take care of Old Madam, while others went to comfort the Sun Clan. It was a mess. Qin Yining pursed his lips and walked over to Qi Tai. He said, "Are you sure father's life is in good condition?" "Yes, I can be sure for now." "Is there any other news outside?" Qi Tai said, "The Emperor used Chao Guozhang again and made him the Crown Prince's Grand Preceptor to support this response. This lowly one doesn't know the specifics." When Qin Yining heard this, he was stunned. Qin Han and Qin Yu were both furious. Qin Yu was steady, so he was able to keep his mouth shut. Qin Han angrily scolded, "What does the Emperor mean by this?" He was the one who used eldest uncle in an important position. Now, he took him down just like that. He also raised Grand Preceptor Chao. The grudge between our family and the Chao family is now big. If Grand Preceptor Chao is promoted again, how can our family be any better? Eldest uncle and my father are loyal and devoted officials in the court. The Emperor, he. Second brother. Qin Yining grabbed Qin Han's wrist and looked at him sternly. Han's second young mistress also pulled Qin Han's hand and shook it. She was about to cry. Only then did Qin Han realize that he had said something wrong. He quietly closed his mouth. Qin Yining said, "I roughly know why Grand Preceptor Chao was promoted. When I return, I will naturally tell my brothers." He turned and asked Qi Tai, "When you came back, what was the situation in the city?" Qi Tai's face was somewhat gloomy. He said in a dry voice, "The number of refugees in the city is gradually increasing. there are still refugees escaping into the city from the outside. This year's drought caused the state treasury to be empty due to the chaos of war. In addition, a large amount of money was used for the peace talks. The emperor shouted the slogan of opening the granary to release grain, but how much grain can support so many mouths to eat continuously? Now that the refugees are not peaceful, the commoners in the city are also anxious. There are already many commoners who are preparing to sell their houses and land. At this moment, the old madam had been awakened by the pinching of her philtrum. She was sobbing as she listened to Chi Tai's reply. Everyone was anxious and uneasy. Their bodies were cold. This kind of fear of the end of the world was like a cold poisonous snake coiling around people's necks. It was suffocating. Sister E, can our family also sell our houses and land? The old madam asked weakly. Qin Yining turned around and asked, Old madam, after we sell our houses and land, what will happen? The old madam was speechless. The room was silent. Occasionally, there were the frightened sobs of her sisters. Qin Yining turned around and faced the room full of womenfolk. He said seriously, our family members can't run away. Under the emperor's watch, they can't run away. Even if the country is really destroyed in the future, with our family Qin's prestige over the years, under the eyes of the people of the Zhou dynasty, our family Qin people can't run away. However, we are a family. We enjoy blessings and endure misfortune together. I won't forget this point. Everyone also won't forget it. The family Qin has been through difficult times, but it has also been glorious. In times of crisis, the whole family came together to kill. Until now, aren't we still safe and sound? The family Qin people have strong backbones and enough wisdom to mediate with foreign powers. As long as we calm down, we will definitely be able to think of a way. Yes, fourth sister is right. Qin Han nodded heavily, it's normal to be afraid. At this juncture, it would be foolish to not be afraid. However, there are things that real men should do and things that they shouldn't do. Even if the emperor sentences our family members to be executed, we can't die crying and lose face for our ancestors. Second brother is right. Moreover, things haven't reached that stage yet. We still have a lot of room for action. Chapter 185. Qin Yining and Qin Han's words were filled with encouragement amidst their despair. Even the unmarried womenfolk felt their blood surge when they heard them. Indignation replaced fear. Even though they were only weak women who had never seen the outside world and were flustered at this time of chaos, there was one thing that Qin Yining and Qin Han were right about: they were all from the family Qin. The family Qin had never done anything that offended the heavens or disgraced their ancestors. Even if the family Qin had to give up their lives, they couldn't let the world look down on them. The emperor was an incapable ruler and was reviled by tens of thousands of people. However, the family Qin couldn't be the same as the incapable ruler. People would die eventually. It was only a matter of time. When they reached a critical moment, they could risk everything in order to maintain their integrity. After thinking through this, although they were still afraid, they weren't so flustered that they couldn't stand steadily. Instead, they were angry at the incapable ruler. However, Qin Han grasped the meaning of Qin Yining's words and asked, Fourth sister, have you thought of a way to save eldest uncle? As soon as he said this, the old madam stood up. Sister E, what good idea do you have? Qin Yining smiled at the old madam to appease her. Don't worry, old madam. I just thought of a way. I still have to discuss it with my uncles and brothers later. Don't worry, I will do my best. Nothing will happen to father. Good, good. The old madam nodded repeatedly. With all of you working together, I can rest assured. The members of the Sun clan also sighed in relief and wiped the tears on their faces with handkerchiefs. Third Madam smiled and helped the old madam to sit down. Old madam, don't worry. Our family's fourth daughter isn't an ordinary girl. Eldest uncle taught her personally. How can she be bad? The old madam smiled when she heard this. The daughter taught by Qin Huayuan was naturally good. In the face of danger, the old madam had clearly forgotten about the past friction. The original sad and fearful atmosphere dissipated like this. Chi Tai saw this and secretly praised in her heart. Her respect and trust for Qin Yining increased by several levels. She no longer dared to treat her as an ordinary girl. After thinking for a while, Chi Tai said, "Fourth miss, there is one more thing I need your instruction. Please speak." Qin Yining looked back at Chi Tai and asked. Chi Tai said, "After the Marquis sent Miss Huining to the fields, he instructed me to go to the Health Preservation Hall to find the whereabouts of Miss Huining's biological parents. Now, they have been found. Miss Huining's father is still alive. And Living's father, he lives lives as fathers Huining's parents, to Paises, he must have used. The families is with the rest of the money. To S's. Twos's. Unfortunately, the Tiger Army launched a surprise attack on the 5th Army camp. The Lise village is near the right sentry camp of the 5th Army camp. A large number of refugees entered the city. I thought Li Yuzhu should be among those refugees. So, I arranged for people to carefully search for him. However, they couldn't find his whereabouts. Presumably, something happened on the way, or he took a detour. He didn't come to the capital at all." Chi Tai's words contained too much information. The womenfolk in the room heard it clearly. In their minds, they sketched out Qin Huining's true family background. A father with gambling debts, and it was Qin Huayuan who ordered people to help him pay off his gambling debts. The old madam frowned and asked, "Is there anyone else in the Li's family?" Replying to the old madam, "There's no one else in their family. They have some poor land, but Li Yuzhu likes to drink and gamble. He's too lazy to farm, so the family's land is abandoned. He also has a daughter named Xiaoya. She should be 10 years old this year. After his wife died 2 years ago, Xiaoya was sold by him. Now, Li Yuzhu is the only widower in their family." I asked carefully. Huining's daughter is the Li's eldest daughter. That year, when the Li's daughter-in-law had just given birth, a man took the swaddling clothes away and gave Li Yuzhu 20 taels. The Li's daughter-in-law's body was damaged because her eldest daughter was sold. In addition, her family was poor, and her husband couldn't be relied on. That's why she died young. So it's like that. It's actually this kind of family. The old madam frowned. Thinking of how Qin Huining had made a voodoo doll to curse her, she felt a wave of disgust in her heart. But in the end, this girl had grown up by her side and had been with her for many years. She also had feelings for her. If she really sent her back to her father's side, what would her fate be? The Sun clan also had mixed feelings. She hated Qin Huining. But after all, they had been mother and daughter for many years. When they heard that Qin Huining had such a background, they also felt a bit of pity for her. On the other hand, Second Master Qin Han was frank and outspoken. He coldly snorted, "Her family is like that. That means that she was brought to our family and enjoyed a heavenly blessing. Gamblers are all shameless. In order to recover their losses, they would even sell their wife and children. If she was at home, she would also have sold her life. She was the legitimate daughter of our family for 14 years and enjoyed endless benefits. But she still wasn't satisfied. In order to frame eldest aunt, she made a voodoo doll to curse grandmother. Qin Yu also didn't like this kind of person. He snorted and said, "Our family has a long history and blood ties. Dragons give birth to dragons, and phoenixes give birth to phoenixes." These words were exactly what everyone present was thinking. A person like Qin Huayuan should naturally have a daughter like Qin Yining. And Qin Huaining's father was a person who would sell his son and daughter for gambling. Presumably, under the influence of blood ties, he definitely wasn't a good person. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Qin Yining frowned and thought for a moment before saying, "I know about this matter. In the past 2 days, the refugees have entered the city, so Qin Huaining's residence must have been affected. With Qin Huaining's temperament, it's inevitable that she will return to the residence to seek shelter." When everyone heard this, they all looked at Qin Yining. They wanted to see how she would decide whether Qin Huaining should stay or leave. Qin Yining pursed her lips. After a while, she instructed Song Lan, later, "Go and pass a message to the servant guarding the door. Tell her that if Qin Huaining comes back, let her in. But she can't be arranged to stay in the inner residence. She can't even think about returning to Snow Pear Courtyard. Have someone clean out the guest room in the northeast corner for her to live in. As for the servants following her, if they want to return to the family Qin, they can come back. If they don't want to, send them away according to the rules." Song Lan bowed and said, "This servant understands." Seeing the old madam and the Sun clan looking at her with an inexplicable gaze, Qin Yining smiled. "To be honest, I don't want to care about her life or death. She's ungrateful and has harmed my mother in every possible way. If she succeeds even once, my mother will suffer great harm. This kind of person is just like her gambling stick father. They're shameless, selfish, and despicable. However, even though I don't have any feelings for her, it doesn't mean that I won't consider the feelings of the old madam, father, and mother. I took her in so that father, mother, and the old madam can have peace of mind. Now that she's back, she's only a guest in my heart. She's no longer our family's young lady." This sentence couldn't be clearer. It made Qin Han admire her from the bottom of his heart. It also made the Sun clan, the old madam, and everyone else have mixed feelings. For Qin Yining to do this, it could be said that she was being extremely benevolent to Qin Huaining. After all, Qin Huaining's previous actions had left a knot in the hearts of the entire family. Qin Yining felt sick of Qin Huaining. Seeing that the matter had been cleared up, she smiled and said, "Old madam, I still want to go to the study outside. Moreover, it's almost time for the hearing, so I'll take my leave first." The old madam nodded and waved her hand at Qin Yining. Qin Yining, Qin Yu, and Qin Han saluted to him, then walked out with the people around them. Once they left the sight of the womenfolk, Qin Yining could no longer pretend to be calm. She frowned and asked Chi Tai, who was behind her, "Do we have a way to contact the people in the Ministry of Justice's prison and make things easier for my father? It's hot this season, so the prison must be very humid. It's the time when mosquitoes, rats, and ants are the most rampant. How much will my father suffer after being thrown into such an environment?" Chi Tai sighed and said, "Although the Marquis has connections in the Ministry of Justice, His Majesty is currently in a fit of anger. His previous actions are also frightening. He's afraid that His Majesty's display of dragon power will implicate his family. Therefore, even if we ask for help now, there probably won't be any results." "That's right. His Majesty has issued an edict. Who dares to interfere with eldest uncle?" Qin Han frowned and said, "However, even if we can't find someone to make an exception, can't we think of a way to pass something over?" Qin Yining shook his head and said, "Let's not do this for now. I'm also afraid that our actions will be too big and make His Majesty even angrier. I'll think of a way first." Everyone was smart. They all knew that Qin Yining had the Zhaoyun Bureau in his hands and the people that Prince Zhongshuan had left behind for her. Presumably, there would be a way. Thus, they didn't dwell on this matter. At this time, Qin Han asked, just now, fourth younger sister said that fourth younger sister has some guesses about the rise of Chao Guizhang. Yes. Qin Yining frowned and said, Chao Guizhang has some connections with the Taitan people. Now that Dezhou is determined to go to war with us, His Majesty has no other choice but to rope in the Taitan. You also know that the Taitan have been harassing the north of Dezhou all year round. They are an existence that is enough to give Dezhou a headache. If the Taitan can send troops to interfere at this time, Dezhou's pressure on us may be reduced a lot. His Majesty wants to use Chao Guizhang to rope in the Taitan. Naturally, he will suppress my father. Qi Tai had followed Qin Huaiyuan for a long time, so he naturally knew a lot of things. However, Qin Han and Qin Yu were stunned when they heard this and were very surprised. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. We didn't know about these things. It's no wonder that eldest uncle raised fourth younger sister like his own son. In terms of political acumen, the two of us concede defeat. Qin Yu said seriously. Eldest brother, don't make fun of me. I only found out about this by accident. Qin Yining smiled and turned to order Ji Yun, later, go and ask Master Zhong to come over. I have something important to discuss with him. However, because of family matters, I can't go out easily. Ji Yun understood immediately. Miss, don't worry. This servant will definitely explain your situation clearly. Head shopkeeper will definitely understand. Qin Yining nodded. Qin Yu and Qin Han had a better understanding of Qin Yining's ability to make use of people. Not long after, the three of them arrived at the outer courtyard study. Second Old Master was currently in the imperial court and had yet to return. Third Elder Master sat alone in a daze with a frown on his face. Seeing that Qin Yu, Qin Han, and Qin Yining had arrived, Third Old Master said dejectedly, you must have heard. Yes. Qin Yining nodded and asked Third Old Master seriously, Third Uncle, I thought of a method that might be beneficial to Father. I want to ask for your opinion. Third Old Master's eyes lit up. He leaned forward and asked, what method do you have? Quickly tell me. Chapter 186. Does Third Uncle still remember that I have a garden on Mount Everlasting Spring? Qin Yining sat down on an armchair to the side. Immediately, a maidservant brought tea over. How could I not remember? It is said that your garden is filled with all kinds of precious birds and plants. It is as grand and magnificent as a celestial palace. It is even more extravagant than the Empress's everlasting spring garden next door. The most precious thing is that there is a hot spring there. Third Master suddenly stopped talking and leaned over in confusion. Sister Yi, why did you mention the garden? Qin Yining smiled. I plan to sell all the exotic flowers and rare birds in the courtyard, as well as all the luxurious decorations in the courtyard. I'll exchange them all for money so that the refugees in the city can settle in. Third Master couldn't help but be flabbergasted when he heard this. Sister E, that garden isn't. I mean, it would be a pity to tear it down and sell it for money. You really don't have to do this. Qin Yu knitted his brows in deep thought. Fourth sister, are you planning to create public opinion? Exactly. Qin Yining smiled faintly. It wasn't that Third Master didn't understand Qin Yining's actions. The news that the Emperor had shut down Qin Huaiyuan and removed him from his position would soon be known by everyone. Qin Huaiyuan had always been very popular among the common people, so the Emperor's actions would naturally attract some public anger. But the Qin family, who was clearly the victim, was willing to sell all the valuable items in a famous garden to support the refugees that the imperial court couldn't support. Once this move was made known, the public opinion would become even louder. As long as the emperor still cherished his reputation, he wouldn't be too harsh on Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Han also understood, but he couldn't help but worry. Your idea is good, but our emperor is a shameless person. Previously, he was able to disregard his reputation and destroy the family of a loyal official like Duke Ding's household. Now, would he let eldest uncle off so easily? Qin Yining thought about it carefully and said cautiously, the situation seems similar, but it's also not the same. At that time, the reason why the emperor ordered the execution of the male members of her maternal grandfather's family was because the emperor of Dezhou had sent a letter of credence. The news had spread through the streets and alleys that the emperor of Dezhou was very dissatisfied with the fact that he didn't get the brain matter and wanted the emperor's life. The emperor was afraid that Dezhou's emperor would immediately order an assassin to kill him. That was why he immediately executed the men of Duke Ding's Fu to appease Dezhou's anger. As for the rumors that His Majesty wanted to appease Emperor Zhou's anger and hoped that the other side would stop the war, I don't agree. His Majesty was mainly afraid that he would be killed by others, followed by the country. Qin Han nodded. You're right. It's different this time. Although the war has already begun, with His Majesty's usual personality, he will still be able to live a life of luxury without a knife on his neck. His sense of crisis will not be as strong. That's why this time, public opinion will put pressure on His Majesty and make him unhappy. It's possible that he will feel ashamed. However, he won't kill my father for the time being. As Qin Yining analyzed the situation, Third Master, Qin Han, and Qin Yu all turned to look at her attentively. Don't look at how His Majesty used Guozhang Chao. In his heart, His Majesty still has some fear of Guozhang Chao. This can be seen from how His Majesty used my father. Right now, His Majesty wants to use the relationship between Guozhang Chao and Tayton to ask for Tayton's help and reduce Dezhou's attack on us. That's why he had no choice but to help Guozhang Chao rise again. However, His Majesty still has some fear of Guozhang Chao. In this court, other than my father, there is no one else who has the ability to control Guozhang Chao. That's why His Majesty didn't immediately kill my father. Instead, he locked him up in the Ministry of Justice's prison for him to reflect on his actions. He also didn't order people to interrogate him. Third Master nodded repeatedly. He didn't think that Qin Yining would be able to analyze the matters of the court so thoroughly. She even knew about the relationship between Tayton and Guozhang Chao. After all, Third Master wasn't an official of the court. With his intelligence and ability, he was already exhausted from managing the family Qin shops and businesses. He didn't have the time or energy to pay attention to the matters of the court. As such, when he heard Qin Yining's analysis, he felt as if he had been enlightened. If that's the case, then if we can create some good public opinion, it really will be helpful to eldest brother. Third Master nodded. Qin Yining said, that's also my analysis. However, I can't be sure if my analysis is correct or not. However, I think that if there is pressure from public opinion, His Majesty isn't someone who will give up. If he wants to continue being a wise ruler, he will definitely let go. Moreover, he still needs to use father to keep the Chao family in check. I feel that fourth sister's analysis is feasible. Qin Han nodded. Qin Yu's thoughts were more profound. He wasn't like Qin Han, who directly gave suggestions. However, after thinking about it carefully, he also felt that Qin Yining's analysis was reasonable. Thus, he nodded in agreement. Third Master stood up and paced back and forth a few times. He clapped his hands and said, "Good. This method is feasible." Thinking about it carefully, this method could not only save Qin Huaiyuan, but also save the rest of the family Qin in the future. Moreover, the brothers had been relying on Qin Huaiyuan for many years. Without Qin Huaiyuan, the family Qin's decision-maker, it would be difficult for them to make any progress. Thus, it was more important to save the people first. As such, Third Master asked, Sister E, how do you plan to settle these refugees? Qin Yining frowned and thought for a moment. He said, send someone to tell these people that there are jobs in my Ning garden. If they can earn food, they can go if they want. I think that for people who live in precarious situations, having a job, food to eat, and a roof over their heads is already enough for them. Third Master was stunned. You don't plan on raising these people for nothing. Qin Yining said in surprise, I'm doing a good deed. I'm not a parent. How can I raise them for nothing? Third Master clapped his hands and laughed heartily. Good, good. Fourth Lass, you're not the type to fish for fame. You're just like your third uncle, ha. Qin Yining laughed and said, since third uncle and my two brothers think it's feasible, then I'll arrange for people to do it. Third Master said, what do you want to do? How much money do you need? Give me a detailed plan. Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. He said, Third uncle, for the sake of insurance, I don't plan on using the family's money for this matter. Also, I have a little idea. Third uncle, you should secretly start paying attention to how many businesses the family owns. Leave a backup plan for the family, just in case. You mean, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Qin Yining smiled faintly. Third uncle, don't worry. I don't have any other intentions. As for the matter of resettling the refugees, if it's successful, then everyone in our family Qin will be responsible for it. If the emperor gets angry, then I'll be responsible for it alone. I'll discuss this matter with the head shopkeeper of the Zhaoyun agency. Whether it's manpower or resources, I don't plan on using the family Qin. I also don't plan on using a single cent of the family Qin's money. Sister E. Third Master was so moved that the rims of his eyes began to sting. When Qin Yu looked at Qin Yining, the expression in his eyes also became deep. He was the one who placed the most importance on protecting himself. Now that he saw that a little girl like Qin Yining was actually so responsible, his face began to heat up. P.S. There's an update tonight. Chapter 187. Compared to Third Master's emotional reaction and Qin Yu's shame, Qin Han laughed heartily. All right, since Fourth Sister has decided, then I will follow your arrangements. Qin Han stood up and said straightforwardly, in any case, we are all doing this for the sake of family, so there is no need to speak of empty words. Fourth Sister, if there is anything you need me to do, don't hesitate to ask. Although I am slow-witted, running errands and passing on messages is still something I can do. Qin Yining was familiar with Qin Han and liked his straightforward and warm-hearted personality. In addition, he had taken care of her on the way back to the capital, so her relationship with Qin Han was closer than that of her other cousins. After thinking for a moment, she said bluntly, I appreciate second brother's kindness, but if there is nothing important, second brother should reduce the number of times you go out. Turning to Third Master and Qin Yu, she said, there are many spies watching us from the outside. If there is even the slightest problem, it will be magnified. You are all men, so it is easier for you to be watched when you go out. As for a little girl like me, I am slightly better. However, we must be careful now. Even if we speak in the inner residence, we must be careful. Don't forget about that person. Qin Yining was referring to concubine Chao, so everyone naturally understood. Although they didn't know Chao Yuqing's true identity, it was an unchangeable fact that she was the daughter of the state senator. Third Master nodded, don't worry, we all understand. In just 2 days, Qin Yining had tidied up the inner residence. Not only did she manage the affairs of the household well, but more importantly, she managed to tidy up the hearts of the womenfolk. Qin Huayuan had just gotten into trouble, and the household was already in chaos. Not to mention the womenfolk, even the men were living with their hearts in suspense, afraid that they would follow in the footsteps of the Sun family. Who would have thought that Qin Yining would quickly and efficiently suppress the matter? Now, not only did the womenfolk not make a fuss, they even seemed to be united against a common enemy. Right now, Third Master Laoi was very fond of Qin Yining. Looking at her bearing, knowledge, and keen judgment on the affairs of the imperial court, as well as the way she handled matters, Third Master Laoi lamented why he didn't have a daughter like her. When Qin Yining saw that everything was settled, he took his leave. It just so happened that head shopkeeper Zhong had arrived as well. She then explained her thoughts to head shopkeeper Zhong in detail. The precious flowers, birds, decorations, and valuable paintings in Ning Garden should be sold now. With this money, it'll be a good start. When the refugees leave, remember to carefully record their names, places of origin, whether they can read, what they used to do, and what they're best at. For the time being, the male servants will help with the construction of the houses. I can only provide them with a large courtyard. The construction of the houses will be their job. Fortunately, there is no shortage of wood or water on Mount Changchun. As for the women, they can do some mending and kitchen chores. They will be provided with 2 meals a day. Breakfast will be mixed grain porridge and salted vegetables. The meal in the afternoon can be mixed appropriately. The men who do manual labor can receive 2 more salted vegetables. Qin Yining thought carefully and said, as for the children, they must also be carefully registered. Pay special attention to their health. Children's bodies are weak. Not only is the weather hot, but there is also a drought and lack of water. On top of that, they have to run for their lives. It's hard to guarantee that no one will get sick. When the children are registered, carefully record whether they can read. In addition, for children under the age of 10, you can give them extra meat. That's in the mountains. If there are people who are good at hunting, you can give them extra food. Yes, Master has thought of everything. I think that as long as they are properly organized, they will be able to form their own system in the mountain villa. In addition, I think that we should pay attention to finding some local tyrants. It's hard to guarantee that there won't be any trouble among the refugees. If something happens, we can suppress it. Also, we should set up a small fire prevention team. They will be responsible for patrolling the fire prevention team every day. After all, it's in the mountains. Master Zhong added. Qin Yining nodded repeatedly. Head shopkeeper is right. In short, since we have already taken action, we should help them to the end. What we need to do is to help them not starve to death. However, we can't encourage their laziness. Head shopkeeper, please take care of these matters. I think that it's hard to say if there are people among these people who can become our helpers in the future. Master Zhong finally understood everything. His eyes lit up as he looked at Qin Yining. He exclaimed, Master, you are killing 3 birds with 1 stone. You are contributing to the protection of the Marquis of Anping and the family Qin. By selling the things in the courtyard that Prince Zhongshuan gave you and turning it into a refugee settlement, you can also dispel the complaints of those who are close to you because of your close relationship with Prince Zhongshuan. Not only will you gain a virtuous reputation, but you will also be able to cultivate a group of direct descendants. Qin Yining blushed with shame and said, Actually, I didn't think that much. I just wanted to save my father. If there are other benefits, they can be considered as additional benefits. What additional benefits? Master, you are being rewarded for your good deeds. What kind of good deeds can there be? I only hope that my father will be safe and sound. As long as my family is safe and sound, I will be satisfied. Father is in the Ministry of Justice's prison. I don't know how much suffering he will have to endure. Qin Yining frowned. Don't worry, Master. I have already thought of a way to secretly send things inside. Qin Yining was surprised. Then, he smiled gratefully. thank you for your efforts, head shopkeeper. It must have been difficult for you to take such a risk at this time. Don't mention it, master. The Zhaoyun agency has a wide network of connections. It's just a matter of a few words and a few taels of silver. It's not worth it. Master Zhong waved his hand and smiled. Qin Yining also smiled. There is something else I want to say to head shopkeeper. With the current state of the court so turbulent, head shopkeeper should think of a way out in advance. After all, you are part of a large family. He had never seen a master who would take the initiative to persuade his subordinates to leave a way out for themselves. Master Zhong smiled sincerely and said, "Yes, master, don't worry. I will make the arrangements. Besides, I still have a son. You can just tell them to do as they wish. I will pay attention to our important matters. I will have to trouble you for everything." Qin Yining was very polite and grateful. The two exchanged pleasantries. Then, Master Zhong took his leave and went to take care of business. Qin Yining thought carefully. After confirming that he had done everything he could, he let out a sigh of relief. Now, he could only wait for a good result. Master Zhong was very efficient. In addition, he knew how to make good use of people. He also had a lot of helpers. In just 2 days, he had already sold a lot of the rare treasures in Ning Garden. He received a huge sum of money that was 5 times the amount of all the properties in the Zhaoyun agency. Master Zhong looked at the account book and counted the banknotes. He couldn't help but click his tongue. Prince Zhongshuan had really spent a lot of money to curry favor with his master. What he didn't know was that this residence was originally built by Chao Guozhang as a gift for the Taitan princess. However, the Taitan princess gave it to the Pang Shao. The Pang Shao only sent Qin Yining and the Pang Shao. Therefore, when this thing was sold, it was naturally the Chao family's money. Unknowingly, the Chao family's money was put into Qin Yining's purse. Master Zhong naturally didn't know how angry Chao Guozhang was. Chapter 188. Chao Guozhang had just been reinstated and felt that his position in the emperor's heart was not as high as before. However, when he saw Qin Huaiyuan being stripped of his official robes and thrown into prison, he felt extremely carefree. Qin Meng, that bastard, deserves to end up like this. Chao Guozhang gave a low laugh and leisurely played with the porcelain bowl in his hand. This subject originally thought that after becoming his son-in-law, we would be able to join hands. Since ancient times, the marriage alliance has always been for the good of the two families. It was also for mutual assistance in court. If our Chao family and the family Qin formed an alliance, then we would be at the peak of our power. Who would be able to shake our foundation? Unexpectedly, not only was Qin Meng completely unwilling to listen, he was also the first to jump out and oppose this old man. He truly doesn't know how to appreciate favors. The empress was dressed in a crimson palace robe with a silk shawl. The golden buyao swayed slightly as she lowered her head, making her face appear even more delicate. Her painted nails tapped on the table as she faintly said, "It's not that this consort wants to say too much, but father should be more attentive this time. Since His Majesty was willing to use you to contact the Taitan, perhaps His Majesty already knew about the matter between us and the Taitan. These days, this consort has been on tenterhooks while following His Majesty around, afraid that His Majesty would discover something. Now, it seems that His Majesty has been keeping a low profile these days. This consort is truly flustered. Your Highness the Empress is right." Chao Guozhang said, "However, Your Highness doesn't need to be too worried. Now that de Zhou's army is pressing down on the border, His Majesty naturally has to rely on this old man. This old man also knows about the Taitan's matter. That's good. This consort will also carefully pay attention to His Majesty's thoughts and will advise His Majesty when the time is right." However, that little whore Qin Yining truly deserves to die. She actually used father's things to do favors and gained a good reputation outside. However, that group of stupid lowly commoners didn't even think about who that thing originally belonged to. The Empress gritted her teeth at the thought of Qin Yining. That wretch was born to go against me. She dared to take in that damned girl from the Tang family, dared to be intimate with that Yun guy, dared to harbor that group of unfortunate widows from the Sun family, and even dared to openly provoke us. Last time, we didn't chop her into pieces because this consort was played by this Tian Jizi. Could it be that we can still allow her to continue acting so arrogantly? Chao Guizhang waved his hand. Nyang Nyang, please calm down. This old official naturally has a way. Could it be that this old man, who has dominated the officialdom for decades, is still unable to defeat a little girl? Since she was feeling smug now, he would let her be smug for 2 days. If you're too complacent, you can only cry. The Empress sneered and gritted her teeth. I don't just want her to cry. I want her to die. Chao Guizhang, on the other hand, smiled faintly. The wrinkles at the corner of his eyes and the smile lines at the edge of his lips showed that he had a card up his sleeve. Seeing this, the Empress smiled proudly. At this time, Master Zhong had already begun to make arrangements for the refugees. Although the exotic flowers, herbs, and beasts in the garden hadn't been sold yet, the refugees in the city couldn't wait any longer. Moreover, Master Zhong had the intention of letting these refugees see with their own eyes what Qin Yining had paid to save their lives. Therefore, Master Zhong first took people to the refugee settlement in the city and explained his purpose in his capacity as fourth young Miss Qin's aide. In their despair, the refugees had already slept on the streets for 4 or 5 days. Moreover, they only had a meal of thin porridge every day and didn't have a place to shelter them from the sun and wind. At night, they were bitten by mosquitoes all over their bodies. Some of the children had already developed a fever, but whether it was the adults or the children, they didn't have the strength to cry. It could be said that they had suffered enough. Now, they heard that the young miss of the Marquis of Enping was actually willing to work for them. They could rely on their own hands to make a living and live a stable life. Wasn't this the life they used to live? The people in despair seemed to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Who wouldn't listen? Apart from a few people who were too lazy to work and felt that they could go home after Zhou Bing left and didn't want to go to Ning Garden, most people were willing to work for fourth young Miss Qin. After following Manager Zhong to everlasting Spring Mountain, these commoners who had never seen such a magnificent garden were all dumbfounded. Even though the residence had been emptied, the palace-like residence was still there. The hot spring was still there, and the plants and birds were still there. This kind of Ning garden still gave people a great shock. This old mister, is your family's young miss really going to sell everything here just to feed us? An old man in his 60s asked with a trembling voice. Master Zhong sighed and said, yes. Now, only these plants are left in this garden to be sold. The rest can't be demolished. The furniture inside has been sold long ago. Otherwise, where would we get the money to make porridge and steamed rice? Our Marquis is an honest official and our young miss is a woman in her boudoir. Her financial resources are limited. At this time, we can only do what we can. Please don't blame us. What are you saying? We can't thank you enough. Yes, fourth young Miss Qin is simply a living bodhisattva. Of course, fourth young Miss Qin is the daughter of Pan and the Wise. She was the one who facilitated the peace talks. Later on, that heaven's predictor even predicted that fourth young Miss Qin's fate was very good, and that she would be able to bless our great Yan dynasty. The refugees discussed animatedly. They were deeply grateful to Qin Huayuan, Qin Yining, and the entire Marquis of Enping's residence for their good deeds. However, when they mentioned that such a good person like Qin Huayuan was still imprisoned by the emperor in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the commoners couldn't help but be angry. They gritted their teeth and cursed the emperor and the demon empress in a low voice. If people's resentment could kill, the demon empress and the fatuous emperor would have been dead by now. Master Zhong was satisfied with their reactions. He smiled and said, "Our young miss has limited manpower. Right now, she is busy moving food, mats, and other things up the mountain. There are also pots and pans for daily necessities. She also ordered people to find a doctor to buy medicinal herbs to treat the children. She really can't spare any manpower to help everyone build a house. What's so difficult about that? As long as we have food to eat, we have strength. Building a shed and a house won't be difficult for us." Yes, Marquis of Onping and fourth young miss have already contributed money and effort. As long as we have food and drink, we can think of other ways. Master Zhong smiled. He pointed at the divine palace-like residence behind him and said with a smile, "However, young miss said that everyone can live in this residence. The elderly, women, children, and people with illnesses can live in this residence first. Strong men can build their own houses in the courtyard. If you want to bathe, there are hot springs on the mountain. You can use them as you wish. If you want to drink, there are also spring waters on the mountain." Really? Fourth young miss is really willing to let us live in such a good residence? A young man asked in surprise. A strong man to the side said, "Nonsense. She's willing to sell all the good things in the house for us to eat. How could she not be willing to let us live in the house? Fourth young miss is a great person." Yes, Marquis of Onping's family are all good people. Seeing everyone begin to discuss gratefully, Master Zhong raised his hands and pressed them down. Everyone fell silent again. Master Zhong warned, "There is one thing that everyone needs to pay attention to. Not far from our residence is the everlasting spring garden, where the empress usually soaks in the hot springs. There are eunuchs and guards from the Chao family in there. Everyone, do not go there. If you want to build a house, you can only build it in this courtyard. Even if you want to go into the mountains to chop wood or hunt, you need to be careful. Don't get on the bad side of the empress. Don't go there. Our young miss is all alone. She can only make decisions in this garden on this mountain for everyone to live in. She can't make decisions in other places." Once these words were said, everyone nodded to express their understanding. The Chao family was powerful, and the Chao Guozhong had run amok for many years. The demon empress was a master who could eat human flesh and drink human blood. Young Miss Qin was a woman of the boudoir. For her to give them a large garden on the mountain to live in was already a great kindness. Everyone was not stupid. How could a rich young miss give them work to do? Even if she wanted to hire people to work, she would find young men and women. There was no reason for her to hire the old, the weak, the women, and the children. She would also specially hire doctors to treat the children and the elderly. She would also sell her property to pay them. She said she was hiring them to work. In reality, fourth young miss was saving their lives. Otherwise, why would she want this group of boorish people? They didn't farm or raise pigs. Did she hire them to destroy such a good garden and build a house in the courtyard? Fourth young miss said this to make them feel at ease. After all, when there was no war, they had their own homes and could rely on their own hands to make a living. She didn't want them to become beggars who had to reach out and beg for food. In contrast to the family Qin's actions, the Empress garden next door was empty and no one lived in it. They didn't see the Emperor and Empress use the internal funds to support them. When recruiting soldiers and collecting taxes, the Emperor boasted shamelessly that everything in the world belonged to him. The common people were also his people. Everything of the common people belonged to the Emperor. It was natural for them to provide for the emperor. But what about when there was a disaster and the common people needed the emperor? Was the emperor's love for the common people to let them sleep on the streets and be bullied by others? Was he only given a bowl of porridge that could reflect a person's figure every day? The women and elders who had already softened their hearts began to wipe their tears. Even the men were moved. Their emotions surged. Their gratitude towards the Marquis of Onping's family Qin rose to another level. Master Zhong was affected by this atmosphere. He thought about how Qin Yining was willing to give up such a precious garden to help the common people settle down. He then thought about all of Qin Yining's previous benevolence and righteousness. He couldn't help but feel moved. He shook his head and sighed. Then he raised his spirits and said, "Come, everyone settle down first. The food and doctors will be here soon. Everyone, you must obey the rules in the courtyard. Also, pay attention to the lights." Master Zhong led the local bullies who had come to help settle down the refugees. But unexpectedly, these refugees, who were filled with gratitude, didn't seem to have any ill intentions. They did as they were told and settled down as they were told. They were even more obedient than well-trained soldiers. It seemed that in the face of a disaster, after people's hearts were truly moved, there was also a side that was filled with love and tolerance. At this time, Qin Yining was as busy as Master Zhong. Chapter 189. When Qin Yining heard this, she slowly put down the teacup in her hand and asked doubtfully, "Didn't I say to invite her in if she comes back? Why is she kneeling in front of the door?" The person who replied was in a difficult position. He quickly looked up at Qin Yining's expression and saw that she was not angry. He then murmured, "It was fine at first, but when Miss Huining heard that Miss had arranged for her to stay in the guest courtyard, she started crying and asked for old Madam's help. The people outside did not dare to disturb old Madam, so they hurriedly came to ask for Miss's instructions." "I see." Qin Yining thought for a while, then instructed Song Lan and Ji Yun, "You two go together and tell Qin Huining that if she wants to stay in the family Qin mansion, she will only be a guest. I can only arrange for her to stay in the guest room. If she does not want to come back, then she can do as she pleases. Now that father is still locked up in the Ministry of Justice's prison, if she is not afraid of being implicated in causing trouble, let her cry at the door." Then he looked at Ji Yun, "Pay attention. If this person dares to be rough, throw her out immediately." "Yes." Ji Yun laughed and turned around to tease Song Lan, "Miss Song Lan, please. Look at how much Miss dotes on you. She ordered you to do things for her and even assigned you a bodyguard." Song Lan burst out laughing. It's clearly a certain Wang Ye's intention. He was afraid that it would be inconvenient for Miss to do things, so he arranged for a bodyguard. "Why are you making fun of me?" As she spoke, she curtsied to Qin Yining and turned to leave. Qin Yining's face was red. She tapped Song Lan's back and said, "Is this girl crazy? She even made fun of me." Bing Tang laughed loudly. Ji Yun, who had changed from a bodyguard to a bodyguard, also laughed and chased after Song Lan. Qin Yining sat in the room and could still hear the two of them making fun of each other. It seemed like Ji Yun had already integrated into the master's study. It was not like when she first came. Everyone was very polite when they met, but there was a sense of distance between them. Qin Yining thought for a moment, then stood up and called for Bing Tang. "Let's go and take a look." Bing Tang asked curiously, "Miss, why weren't you with Song Lan and the others just now?" Then he reacted and laughed, "Miss, you're too naughty. You obviously wanted to watch the show." Qin Yining also laughed. Song Lan and Ji Yun arrived at the door. Before they even got close, they heard low sobbing and buzzing discussions outside the door. The two of them looked at each other and felt that something was amiss. They walked out of the side door in a few steps and immediately saw Qin Yining and the others kneeling at the door. Behind them, there were more than 10 commoners pointing and whispering. It was too late for Qin Huining to wear the pine hairpin in her hair. Although her clothes were made of good material, she didn't know how they got wrinkled. There was also a 2-inch long cut on her sleeve, and her hair was scraped out. Her face was full of aggrieved tears, like a Persian cat abandoned by a rich family. Her originally bright fur was now a mess, and she looked especially pitiful. When Song Lan saw this, he felt anger rise in his heart. He almost could not help but laugh coldly. The house was already in such a mess, and this person still wanted to come back and cause trouble. Ayoyo, I was wondering who was causing trouble at the door. So it's Miss Huining. Song Lan went down the stairs and used both hands to help her. Miss, quickly get up. What's going on? Didn't the house prepare a guest room for Miss to stay in? Why doesn't Miss want to go in? Song Lan's voice was louder than usual, and it was loud enough for the people watching the commotion to hear clearly. Qin Yining's body was still hanging down, and she sobbed, I'm not going to stay in the guest courtyard. I'm family Qin's daughter. Why do I have to stay in the guest courtyard? The servant said that Qin Yining is now in charge of the house, so they arranged for me to stay in the guest courtyard. What right does she have to treat me like this? I want to see old madam. Old madam will definitely seek justice for me. She sobbed and complained tearfully, as if she had suffered a great grievance. Song Lan saw that she was unwilling to get up, so he did not help her. He sneered and said, Huining Miss, your words are so meaningless. Do you still think that your family Qin's daughter? Don't talk about the masters being bitterly disappointed. Even if the servants heard it, they would laugh until their teeth fell out. That's right. Ji Yun also said, the Marquis and Madam doted on you as if you were their own daughter. As long as the ladies in our fu have something, they would never treat you unfairly. You have delicate servants serving you, eating delicacies, and wearing silk and satin, but you're still not satisfied. Not only did you plot to harm our ladies, you even made witchcraft dolls to harm old madam and madam. Ji Yun went down the stairs and said to the commoners who had stopped to watch the commotion, everyone, say something. How can this kind of ingrate still have the face to cause trouble? The passers-by looked at each other in dismay. Some people already felt that it was meaningless and went home. You're slandering me. Qin Yining's face alternated between red and white. Seeing that a few of the onlookers had left, her heart turned cold. If there wasn't the power of public opinion, she really didn't dare to guarantee that she would be able to live the life of a master when she came back. Song Lan said, the Marquis is soft-hearted. You harmed our old madam, and young miss. The Marquis only asked you to move to the manor because of the many years of father-daughter relationship. The Marquis only asked you to move to the manor to live. There is no shortage of food and clothing. If it was someone else who was more hard-hearted, they would throw you outside and let you die. Wouldn't that be what you deserved? Wouldn't you also have to endure it? At this moment, something big has happened in the family. Old madam and madam are sick and bedridden. The authority to manage the family has been given to our young Mississippi young miss is benevolent and kind. Thinking of the chaos outside, she specially instructed people to invite you back to the guest courtyard if you come back. Yet, you're still not satisfied. You still have the face to think that you're the true master of this family. Where did you get such a big face? Qin Yining was so angry that her whole body trembled and her face turned purple. Seeing the onlookers begin to point at her, she actually felt a sense of fear and regret. Perhaps she shouldn't have been greedy and caused this commotion. But things had already come to this point. If she didn't continue, how could she still have face? Qin Yining said weakly, but Ji Yun interrupted Qin Yining's words and went forward to support her. She didn't seem to use any strength, but Qin Yining was directly lifted up. Our young miss is busy serving the elders and managing the inner residence. Not to mention, she is also busy settling the refugees in the city. She doesn't even have enough time to sleep. Young miss said that even if she saw a stranger in trouble, she would still help. Moreover, you were once the Marquis's adopted daughter. Although your behavior is improper, we can't ignore you. The guest courtyard has already been arranged. Young miss, don't make a fuss. Come in. Ji Yun supported Qin Yining's arm, but her fingers pinched Qin Yining's wrist. She couldn't leave a mark, but she also couldn't break free. Qin Yining's eyes were hazy with tears. She wanted to say something, but when she saw Ji Yun's smiling face that didn't have a trace of a smile, she couldn't say a word. She was brought into the residence. The few onlookers outside also dispersed. They were still whispering about how outrageous this adopted daughter was. After all, no one knew if Qin Yining was bullied, but it was true that the family Qin's fourth young miss sold her property to support the refugees. There were even some trustworthy commoners who specially went to Changchun Mountain to confirm it. Qin Yining had just entered the residence when she saw Qin Yining wearing a light green robe. She was standing next to a banana tree and was looking at her with a smile. She said gently, "You're back. Quickly go to the guest courtyard to settle down." Qin Yining felt like she had been slapped in the face. Just as she was about to speak, a burst of cheers came from the main entrance. "The Marquis is back. The Marquis is back. Quickly, quickly tell the old madam and young miss. The Marquis is back." Qin Yining was stunned when she heard this. Then, she was overjoyed. She lifted her skirt and dashed over like the wind.